we can't go on like this. And second, the challenges we face are solvable. But that requires us to make sure the mechanisms of international problem solving actually solve problems. The Summit of the Future was a first step, but we have a long way to go. And getting there requires confronting three major drivers of unsustainability. A world of impunity, where violations and abuses threaten the very foundation of international law and UN Charter. A world of inequality, where injustices and grievances threaten to undermine countries or even push them over the edge. And a world of uncertainty, where unmanaged global risks threaten our future in unknowable ways. These worlds of impunity, inequality, and uncertainty are connected and colliding. Excellencies, the level of impunity in the world is politically indefensible and morally intolerable. Today, a growing number of governments and others feel entitled to get out of jail free card. They can trample international law. They can violate the United Nations Charter. They can turn a blind eye to international human rights conventions or the decisions of international courts. They can thumb their nose at international humanitarian law. They can invade another country, lay waste to whole societies, or utterly disregard the welfare of their own people. And nothing will happen. We see this age of impunity everywhere, in the Middle East, in the heart of Europe, in the Horn of Africa, and beyond. The war in Ukraine is spreading with no signs of letting up. Civilians are paying the price in rising death tolls and shattered lives and communities. It is time for a just peace based on the UN Charter, on international law, and on UN resolutions. Meanwhile, Gaza is a non-stop nightmare that threatens to take the entire region with it. Look no further than Lebanon. We should all be alarmed by the escalation. Lebanon is at the brink. The people of Lebanon, the people of Israel, and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. Let's be clear. Nothing can justify the abhorrent acts of terror committed by Hamas on October 7th or the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The speed and scale of the speed and scale of the killing and destruction in Gaza are unlike anything in my years as Secretary General. More than 200 of our own staff have been killed, many with their families. And yet, the women and men of the United Nations continue to deliver humanitarian aid. And I know you join me in paying a special tribute to UNRWA and to all humanitarians in Gaza. The international community must mobilize for an immediate ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the beginning of an irreversible process towards a two-state solution. For those who go on undermining that goal with more settlements, more land grabs, more incitement, I ask, what is the alternative? How could the world accept a one state in which a large number of Palestinians would be included without any freedom, any rights, or dignity. In Sudan, a brutal power struggle has unleashed horrific violence, including widespread rape and sexual assaults. A humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding as famine spreads. Yet outside powers continue to interfere with no unified approach to finding peace. In the Sahel, the dramatic and rapid expansion of the terrorist threat requires a joint approach rooted in solidarity, but regional and international cooperation have broken down. From Myanmar to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to Haiti, to Yemen and beyond, we continue to see appalling levels of violence and human suffering in the face of a chronic failure to find solutions. Meanwhile, our peacekeeping missions are too often operating in areas where simply there is no peace to keep. Instability in many places around the world is a byproduct of instability in power relations and geopolitical divides. For all its perils, the Cold War had rules. There were hotlines, red lines, and guardrails. It can feel as though we don't have that today, and nor do we have a unipolar world. We are moving to a multipolar world, but we are not yet there yet. We are in a purgatory of polarity. And in this purgatory, more and more countries are filling the spaces of geopolitical divides, doing whatever they want with no accountability. That is why it is more important than ever to reaffirm the Charter, to respect international law, to support and implement decisions of international courts, and to reinforce human rights in the world, anywhere and everywhere. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellences, ladies and gentlemen,
l'augmentation des inégalités
rising
est un
inequalities
deuxième
are a
facteur
second driver of
d'insoutenabilité et
unsustainability
une tâche sur
and
notre
a stain
conscience
on our
collective.
collective conscience.
L'inégalité n'est pas une question
Inequality
technique
is not a
ou
technical
bureaucratique.
or bureaucratic issue.
Au fond,
At
l'inégalité
its
est une
heart,
question de pouvoir
inequality is a
aux
question of
racines
power
historiques.
with historic roots.
Les conflits,
Conflict,
les bouleversements climatiques
climate
et
upheaval,
la crise du coût
and
de
the
la
cost
vie
of living crisis
étendent ces racines
pushing those
historiques
roots
plus profondément
even deeper.
encore. Dans le même temps,
At the
le
same
monde
time,
peine
the
encore à
world
se
has not
relever
recovered
de la
from the
flambée des
surge in
inégalités
inequalities
engendrées par la
caused by
pandémie.
the pandemic.
Si l'on regarde les 75
Of
pays
the world's
les plus
poorest
pauvres du
75
monde,
countries,
un tiers d'entre eux
one-third
se trouvent
are worse
aujourd'hui
off today
dans une situation
than they
pire
were
qu'il y a 5 ans.
5 years ago.
Au cours de la même
During
période,
that same period,
les 5 hommes
five
les plus
richest
riches de
men
la
in the
planète
world
ont plus que
have
doublé
more than doubled
leur fortune.
their wealth.
Et 1% des habitants
And
de la
the top
planète
1% of people
détiennent
on Earth
43%
own
de l'ensemble
43%
des
of
avoirs
all
financiers
global
mondiaux.
financial assets.
Au niveau national,
At the
certains
national
gouvernements
level,
découplent
some
les
governments are
inégalités
supercharging
en
inequalities
accordant des cadeaux
by
fiscaux
doling out
massifs aux
massive
entreprises
tax
et aux
giveaways
ultra-riches,
to
au
corporations and the
détriment des
ultra-rich,
investissements dans la
while
santé,
shortchanging
l'éducation
investments in
et la
health,
protection sociale.
education and social protection.
Et personne n'est plus lésé que les femmes
No
et
one
les
is
filles du
being
monde
more
entier.
shortchanged than the world's women and
Excellences,
girls. Excellences,
la discrimination et les abus généralisés
rampant
fondés sur le
gender-based
genre
discrimination and
constituent
abuse
l'inégalité la
are
plus
the most
répandue dans
prevalent
toutes les
inequality
sociétés.
across all societies.
Chaque jour, il
Every
semble
day,
que nous soyons
it seems
confrontés
that
à
we
de
are
nouveaux cas
confronted by
révoltants
yet
de
more
féminicide,
sickening cases
de
of
violences fondées sur
femicide,
le genre et
gender-based
de viols
violence
collectifs
and mass rape,
en temps de paix
both in
comme en
peacetime
temps qu'arme de
and
guerre.
as a weapon of war.
Dans certains pays, les lois sont
In some
utilisées pour
countries,
menacer
laws are
la
being
santé
used
et les
to
droits
threaten
reproductifs.
reproductive health and rights.
Et en Afghanistan,
And in
les
Afghanistan,
lois sont utilisées pour
laws are being
entériner
used to
l'oppression
lock in the
systématique des
systematic
femmes
oppression
et
of
des
women
filles.
and girls.
Et je suis désolé de
And I
constater
am sorry to
que malgré
observe
des années de beaux
that
discours,
despite years of talk,
l'inégalité de genre
gender
se manifeste
inequality
Et je vous
is
demande
on
pardon
full
de le dire,
display.
elle se
Please
manifeste
forgive me,
aujourd'hui
it's on
encore
full
pleinement dans
display
cette enceinte.
in this hall as well.
Moins de 10%
Less than
des
10%
intervenants au débat
of speakers
général de cette
during this
semaine
week's
sont
general
des femmes.
debate are women.
C'est inacceptable,
This is
surtout
unacceptable,
quand on sait que
especially
l'égalité
when
entre
we
les
know
hommes
that
et
gender
les femmes
equality
contribue à la
delivers
paix,
for
au
peace,
développement
sustainable
durable, à
development,
l'action
climate
climatique
action,
et bien plus
and
encore.
much more.
C'est précisément
That is
pour
That
cela
is precisely
que
why
nous avons pris des
we
mesures
took
spécifiques
targeted
pour atteindre
measures
la
to
parité
achieve gender
homme-femme
parity
parmi les hauts responsables
among
de
the
l'Organisation
United
des Nations
Nations
Unies,
senior leadership.
objectif qui est déjà complété.
This is a goal that we have already
C'est
achieved.
faisable.
It's doable.
J'exhorte les institutions
I call
politiques et
on
économiques du monde dominées
male-dominated
par les
political
hommes
and
à le
economic
faire aussi.
establishments around the world to do it as well.
Excellences,
Excellences,
les inégalités mondiales se
global
reflètent et se
inequalities
renforcent
are reflected
jusque dans
and
nos propres
reinforced
organisations
even in our
internationales.
own global
Le
institutions.
Conseil de sécurité
The
des
United
Nations
Nations
Unies
Security
a été
Council
conçu par les
was
vainqueurs de la
designed by
Seconde
the
Guerre
victors
mondiale.
of the Second World War.
À l'époque, la majeure
At the
partie du
time,
continent
most of
africain
the
était
African
encore sous
continent was still
domination
under
coloniale.
colonial domination.
À ce jour, l'Afrique
To this
n'a
day,
toujours aucun
Africa
siège
has no
permanent
permanent seat
au sein
on
de
the
la
world's
principale instance de
preeminent
paix du
Council
monde.
of Peace.
Un changement s'impose.
This must change.
Et il en va de même pour l'architecture financière
So must the
mondiale
global financial
mise en place
architecture
il y a
set
80
up
ans.
80 years ago.
Je félicite les dirigeants de la
I
Banque
commend the
mondiale et du
leaders
Fonds
of the
monétaire
World Bank and
international
the International
pour les
Monetary
mesures
Fund
importantes
for
qu'ils ont
taking
entreprises.
the important steps that they
Mais comme le
have.
souligne le pacte
But,
pour
as the
l'avenir,
Pact for the Future
la lutte contre
emphasizes,
les inégalités
tackling
exige une
inequalities requires
accélération de la
accelerating
réforme
reform
de
of the
l'architecture
international
financière
financial
internationale.
architecture.
Au cours des 8 dernières
Over the past
décennies,
8 decades,
l'économie
the
mondiale
global
s'est
economy
développée et
has grown
transformée.
and transformed.
Et les institutions de
The
Bretton
Bretton
Woods
Woods
n'ont pas suivi le
institutions
rythme.
have not kept
Elles ne
pace.
sont plus en mesure de
They can no
fournir un
longer
filet de
provide a
sécurité
global
mondiale,
safety net
ni d'offrir aux pays en
or offer
développement
developing
le niveau de
countries the
soutien
level of
dont ils ont tant
support
besoin.
that they need.
Dans les pays les plus pauvres du monde,
In the world's
le coût
poorest
des intérêts
countries,
de
the
la
debt
dette
interest
dépasse en
payments
moyenne
now cost
le coût des
more on
investissements dans
average than
l'éducation,
investments
la
in
santé
education,
et les
health,
infrastructures
and
publiques
infrastructure
réunies.
combined.
Et à l'échelle du monde,
And around the
plus de
world,
80%
more than
des cibles des
80%
objectifs
of
de
Sustainable
développement
Development
durable
Goal
ne sont
targets
pas en
are
bonne voie.
off track.
Excelências,
Excellencies,
volver al camino
getting
correcto
back on track
requiere un
requires a
aumento de
surge of
financiamiento
financing
para la
for
Agenda
the 2030
2030 y el
Agenda
Acuerdo de
and the
París.
Paris Agreement.
Y eso implica que los países del
means that
G20
G20 countries
lideren un
need
estímulo
to
para los
lead on an
objetivos de desarrollo
SDG
sostenible
stimulus
de 500
of
mil millones de dólares
$500
al año.
billion a year.
Implica reformas
It means
para aumentar
reforms to substantially
sustancialmente la
increase
capacidad de
the lending
préstamo
capacity
de los
of
bancos
multilateral
multilaterales de
development
desarrollo
banks
y permitirles
and
ampliar
to enable them to
masivamente la
massively scale
financiación
up
asequible a largo
affordable
plazo
long-term
para el clima
climate
y el
and
desarrollo.
development finance.
Implica ampliar la
It means
financiación de
expanding
contingencia
contingency
mediante
financing
el reciclaje de los
through
derechos
recycling of
especiales de
special
giro
drawing rights.
e implica promover
And
una
it means
reestructuración de la
promoting
deuda a largo
long-term
plazo.
debt restructuring.
Excelencias,
Excellencies,
no me hago ilusiones
I have no
sobre las
illusions
barreras
about the
a la
obstacles
reforma del
to
sistema
reform of the
multilateral.
multilateral system.
Los que tienen poder
Those
político
with
y
political and
económico
economic
o
power,
los que creen tenerlo,
or those who believe
son
they have that
siempre
power,
reacios al
are
cambio.
always reluctant to change.
pero el statu quo
But
ya está
the
agotando
status
su
quo
poder.
is already draining
Sin
their power.
reformas, la
Without
fragmentación
reform,
es
fragmentation
inevitable
is inevitable.
y las
And
instituciones
global
globales
institutions
perderán
will become
legitimidad,
less legitimate,
credibilidad
less credible,
y eficacia.
and less effective.
Excellencies, the third driver of our unsustainable world is uncertainty. The ground is shifting under our feet. Anxiety levels are off the charts, and young people in particular are counting on us and seeking solutions. Uncertainty is compounded by two existential threats: the climate crisis and the rapid advance of technology, in particular artificial intelligence. Excellencies, we are in a climate meltdown. Extreme temperatures, raging fires, droughts, and epic floods are not natural disasters. They are human disasters, increasingly fueled by fossil fuels. No country is spared. But the poorest and most vulnerable are hardest hit. Climate hazards are blowing a hole through the budgets of many African countries, costing up to 5% of GDP every year. And this is just the start. We are on course to careen past the global limit of a 1.5 degree temperature rise. But as the problem gets worse, solutions are getting better. Renewable prices are plummeting, rollout is accelerating, and lives are being transformed by affordable, accessible, clean energy. Renewables don't just generate power, they generate jobs, wealth, energy security, and a path out of poverty for millions. But developing countries cannot be plundered in that journey. Our panel on critical minerals has recommended fair and sustainable ways to meet global demand for these resources which are essential to the renewables revolution. Excellencies, a future without fossil fuel is certain. A fair and fast transition is not. That is in your hands. By next year, every country must produce an ambitious new national climate action plan or national determined contributions. And this must bring national energy strategies, sustainable development priorities, and climate ambitions together. They must align with 1.5 degree limit, cover the whole economy, and contribute to every one of the COP28 energy transition targets. An International Energy Agency report released today breaks this down. By 2035, on average, advanced economies must slash energy emissions 80% and the emerging markets 65%. The G20 is responsible for 80% of total emissions. They must lead the charge, keeping with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different national circumstances. But these must be done with a joint effort, pooling resources, scientific capacities, and proven and affordable technologies for all to be able to reach those targets. I'm honored to be working closely with President Lula of Brazil, who is both G20 chair and COP30 host, to secure maximum ambition, acceleration, and cooperation. We just met for that purpose. Finance is essential. COP29 is around the corner. It must deliver a significant new finance goal. And we also need a loss and damage fund that meets the scale of the challenge and developed countries meeting their adaptation finance promises. And we must finally flip the script on a crazy situation. We continue to reward polluters to wreck our planet. The fossil fuel industry continues to pocket massive profits and subsidies, while everyday people bear the costs of climate catastrophe, from rising insurance premiums to lost livelihoods. I call on G20 countries to shift money from fossil fuel subsidies and investments to a just energy transition, to put an effective price on carbon, and to implement new and innovative sources of financing, including solidarity levies on fossil fuel extraction through legally binding, transparent mechanisms. All by next year, and this taking into account that those who shoulder the blame must foot the bill. Polluters must pay. Excellencies, the rapid rise of new technologies poses another unpredictable existential risk. Artificial intelligence will change virtually everything we know, from work, education and communication to culture and politics. We know AI is rapidly advancing, but where is it taking us? To more freedom or more conflict? To a more sustainable world or greater inequality? To being better informed or easier to manipulate? A handful of companies and even individuals have already amassed enormous power over the development of AI with little accountability or oversight for the moment. Without a global approach to its management, artificial intelligence could lead to artificial divisions across the board. A great fracture with two internets, two markets, two economies, with every country forced to pick a side and enormous consequences for all. The United Nations is the universal platform for dialogue and consensus. It is uniquely placed to promote cooperation on AI based on the values of the Charter and international law. The global debate happens here, or it does not happen. And I welcome important first steps. 2 resolutions in the General Assembly, the Global Digital Compact, and the recommendations of the high-level body on AI can lay the foundations for inclusive governance of AI. Let's move forward together to make AI a force for good. Excellencies, nothing lasts forever, but the feature of human life is that it appears otherwise. The current order always feels fixed until it is not. Across human history, we see empires rising and falling, old certainties crumbling, tectonic shifts in global affairs. Today, our course is unsustainable. It is in all our interests to manage the epic transformations underway, to choose the future we want, and to guide our world towards it. Many have said that the divisions and differences today are just too great, that it is impossible for us to come together for the common good. You proved that is not true. The Summit of the Future showed that with a spirit of dialogue and compromise, we can join forces to steer our world to a more sustainable path. It is not the end. It is the start of a journey, a compass in the whirlwind. Let's keep going. Let's move our world towards less impunity and more accountability, less inequality and more justice, less uncertainty and more opportunity. The people of the world are looking to us, and succeeding generations will look back on us. Let them find us on the side of the United Nations Charter, on the side of our shared values and principles, and on the right side of history. And I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 8, entitled General Debate. Excellencies, heads of state and government, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I extend a heartfelt welcome to the delegations from member states, observers, and esteemed guests. It is my profound honor and privilege to welcome you to this august hall for the general debate of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Before I proceed, I would like to recognize the presence here today of 9 of my predecessors, past presidents of the General Assembly. Although barely 2 weeks in the job, I can already appreciate the challenges they navigated through. The general debate remains one of the world's most inclusive, representative, and authoritative platforms for global reflection and collective action. This year, the urgency of our task cannot be overstated. We are falling behind in our pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals. I am informed that with just 5 years to go, less than 18% of the goals have been achieved. Also, the climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It is here now, ravaging ecosystems and dismantling the livelihoods of entire communities. Conflicts rage from the Middle East to Ukraine, from Haiti to South Sudan, leaving in their wake death, destruction, and immense suffering. I call for an immediate ceasefire in all these conflict settings. For almost a year now, the people of Gaza and Israel have been caught in a spiraling cycle of conflict and retribution. I take this opportunity to call for an immediate ceasefire for the Hamas-Israel war, the unconditional release of hostages, and for all parties to abide by international law, including international humanitarian law, and work towards a just and lasting solution grounded in the United Nations Charter, relevant resolutions, and international law ensuring dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis. Indeed, only a two-state solution can end the cycle of violence and instability, ensuring peace, security, and dignity for both Palestinians and Israelis. Excellencies, we should be coming together for peace and the well-being of our citizens. We should not divert essential resources into military stockpiles, fueling an arms race never before seen since the Cold War era. Nuclear weapons continue to be a threat to humanity and to our planet. A nuclear war must never be fought. Conditions for their use or accidental explosion must always be avoided. We call for urgent measures for the abolition of these tools of the annihilation of the human race and our environment. Old hatreds rooted in prejudice and ignorance persist, and new divisions arise where none should exist. In the recent past, mistrust among states has grown steadily, complicating prospects for peaceful settlement of interstate disputes. It is time to invest more in building trust and practicing dialogue. Constant dialogue is a powerful weapon for all governments have in their hands. Trust and dialogue are integral parts of our human dignity and precondition for lasting peace and security. Excellencies, gender equality remains a distant goal, as many women and girls around the world continue to be denied their basic rights, justice, and opportunities. Globally, we witness a troubling regression in the protection of human rights and human dignity. Millions remain trapped in poverty, their lives restricted by forces beyond their control. Forced labor and modern slavery, extending even to young boys and girls of school age, are an insult to human dignity. They must be combated in every society at all times. Excellencies, there is an urgent need to reform the international financial system, as too many countries remain burdened by crippling debt, forced to choose between servicing loans and improving the lives of their citizens. Meanwhile, the digital divide continues to widen, cutting off entire populations from the tools needed to succeed in the 21st century. Excellencies, we are not mere spectators of these crises, nor are we powerless to act. Within this hall are the leaders and representatives of the world's nations, the very people with the authority and responsibility to shape the course of our shared future. At our disposal is one of the most powerful tools for positive change: international cooperation grounded in the undeniable truth that even the most powerful nation cannot solve these complex borderless challenges alone. This truth was reaffirmed through our efforts at the Summit of the Future and the consensus adoption of the Pact of the Future. The Pact of the Future charts a path forward, reinvigorating our multilateral institutions with renewed energy, focus, and clarity to meet the demands of a rapidly changing world. Let us build on this momentum. Excellencies, a better world begins with unlocking the potential of we, the peoples of the world. Freedom and good governance ensure that no one, no individual, no community is left behind. In this endeavor, we must never overlook the challenges faced by the small island developing states, the landlocked developing states, the least developing countries, and the small states. It is incumbent on the United Nations to do more than just express solidarity. Specific programs responding to the unique situations in which these groups of states find themselves must be envisaged. This will be a priority of my presidency. Africa is one of the priorities of the United Nations. We must support Africa. The African Union's Agenda 2063 presents a bold and transformative vision for the continent. Africa currently has the youngest population in the world, and by 2063, 1 in 4 people will be African. The generation of resources for the well-being of these peoples has been much slower than the population growth. We must not let Africa's potential go unrealized. In fact, to truly unlock Africa's vast potential, we must actively cultivate global partnerships that align with the continent's aspirations and drive its success. In this endeavor, I look forward to working with member states of the United Nations this year on keeping Africa at the heart of our agenda. Excellencies, in this 79th session, I also want to prioritize multilingualism as a recognition of our world's cultural and linguistic richness. We understand that the multitude of languages, cultures, and perspectives should not be viewed as a source of division, but as a wellspring of strength. Excellencies, we anticipate a very successful high-level week. In addition to the recently concluded Summit of the Future and this ongoing general debate, several critical high-level events are expected to take place. These include the high-level event on microbial resistance, the high-level meeting on addressing the existential threats posed by sea level rise, and the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Throughout the 79th session, we will address the urgent issues of our time. While we may not agree on every issue, we all share the same fundamental goal: to build a better world for everyone, everywhere. Here today are representatives from 193 member states, each embodying our collective aspirations, each guided by a shared vision. The path ahead is difficult, fraught with obstacles that may at times seem insurmountable, but they are not impassable. We have the tools, the knowledge, and the collective will to overcome these challenges if we act together with courage and conviction. Thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all the speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into other official United Nations languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely, that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA 200, located behind the podium, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Muito bem. Meus cumprimentos
My
ao presidente
greetings
da Assembleia
to
Geral,
the President of the
Filemon
General
Yang.
Assembly, Mr.
E
Yang.
também quero saudar o
I would like to greet the
secretário
Secretary-General,
geral Antônio Guterres,
Antonio
cada
Guterres,
dos
and
chefes de
each
Estado
of
e
the
de
heads of
governo
state and
e delegados
government
e delegadas
and
do
delegates
presente.
present.
Dirijo-me em particular
I'd like to address
a delegação
specifically to the
palestina
Palestinian
que integra
delegation
pela
who
primeira
is
vez
taking part
essa
in this
sessão de
opening
abertura,
session for the
mesmo
first
que
time
ainda não sendo membro
as an
observador.
observer member.
E quero saudar
I'd like to
a presença do presidente
also
Mahmoud Abbas aqui presente.
mention President Abbas
Senhoras
attending
e
this meeting.
Adotamos
Ladies and
ontem
gentlemen, the day
aqui
before
neste mesmo
yesterday,
plenário,
here in this
o
very
Pacto para o
plenary,
Futuro.
we adopted the Pact for
Sua
the
difícil
Future.
aprovação
Its difficult
demonstra o
approval
enfraquecimento
shows the
de nossa
weakening
capacidade
of our
coletiva de
collective
negociação e
capacity
de
for
diálogo.
negotiation and
Seu
dialogue.
alcance
Its
limitado
limited scope
também é a
is
expressão
also
do
an
paradoxo
expression
do
of the
nosso tempo.
paradox of our
Andamos em
time.
círculos
We walk
entre
around in
compromissos
circles
possíveis que
between
levam
possible
a
commitments that
resultados
lead to
insuficientes.
insufficient results.
Nem mesmo
Not even
com a tragédia
with
da
the tragedy
Covid-19
of COVID-19
fomos capazes de
were
nos
we
unir em
able
torno de
to unite
tratado sobre
around a treaty
pandemias
on
na
pandemics at
Organização
the
Mundial
World
da
Health
Saúde.
Organization.
Precisamos ir
We need
muito
to go
além
much
e
further
dotar
and
a ONU
provide
dos
the
meios
UN
necessários
with
para
the
enfrentar as
necessary
mudanças
means to face the
vertiginosas do
dizzying
panorama
changes in the
internacional.
international panorama.
Vivemos momentos de
We are
crescentes
living in a
angústias,
time of growing
frustrações, tensões
anguish,
e medo.
frustration,
Testemunhamos
tension,
a
and
alarmante
fear.
escalada
We are
de disputas
witnessing an
geopolíticas
alarming
e de
escalation of
rivalidades
geopolitical
estratégicas.
disputes and strategic
2023
rivalries.
ostenta o
2023
triste recorde
holds
do maior
the
número de
sad record
conflitos
of the
desde a
highest
Segunda Guerra
number of
Mundial.
conflicts since
Os
World War
gastos
II.
militares globais
Global military
cresceram pelo
spending
9º
grew
ano
for the ninth
consecutivo e
consecutive
atingiram
year and
2
reached
trilhões e 400 bilhões de
$2.4
dólares.
trillion.
Mais de 90 bilhões de
Over
dólares
$90 billion
foram mobilizados
have
com
been
arsenais
mobilized with
nucleares.
nuclear arsenals.
Esses recursos
These
poderiam ter sido
resources
utilizados
could have
para
been used
combater
to
a fome
finance the
e
the
enfrentar
fight
a
against
mudança do
hunger
clima.
and climate
O que
change.
se vê
What
é
we
o
are
aumento
seeing
das
is an
capacidades
increase in
bélicas.
military
O uso da
capabilities.
força,
The use of
sem
force,
amparo no direito
not supported
internacional,
by
está
international
se
law,
tornando a
is
regra.
becoming the rule.
Presenciamos dois
We are
conflitos simultâneos
witnessing
com
two
potencial de
simultaneous
se tornarem
conflicts with the potential
confrontos
to become
generalizados.
widespread
Na Ucrânia,
conflagrations.
é com pesar
In
que
Ukraine,
vemos a
with
guerra se
regret,
estender
we are
sem
seeing the war
perspectiva de paz.
extending without any
O Brasil
prospect of peace.
condenou de maneira
Brazil
firme a
has
invasão do
firmly
território
condemned the invasion
ucraniano.
of the Ukrainian
Já está claro
territory. It
que
is
nenhuma
already
das
clear
partes
that
conseguirá
neither
atingir
side will
todos
be
os seus
able to
objetivos
achieve all
pela
their
via
objectives
militar.
through military
O
means.
recurso a armamento
The use
cada vez mais destrutivo
of increasingly
traz à memória
destructive weapons
os tempos mais
brings to the
sombrios do
mind
confronto
the
estéril
darkest days of
da
this
Guerra Fria.
sterile Cold
Criar
War
condições
confrontation.
para a
Creating
retomada do
conditions for
diálogo
resuming
direto entre
direct
as
dialogue
partes é
between the
crucial
parties
nesse momento.
is crucial at
Esta
this time.
é a mensagem do
This is a
entendimento
message
de 6
of the
pontos
6
que China e
points of
Brasil
understanding
oferecem
that China
para que se
and Brazil
instale
offer
processo de
for a
diálogo
process
e o
of
fim
dialogue
da
to be established
hostilidade.
and for the
Em Gaza
hostilities
e na
to
Cisjordânia,
end. In Gaza
assistimos
and
a
the
uma das
West
maiores
Bank, we are
crises
witnessing one
humanitárias
of
da
the
história
greatest
recente
humanitarian
e
crises
que
in
agora
recent
se expande
history, which is now
perigosamente para o
spreading
Líbano.
dangerously to
O que
Lebanon.
começou como ação
What
terrorista
began
de
as a
fanáticos
terrorist
contra civis
action by
israelenses
fanatics
inocentes
against
tornou-se uma
innocent
punição
Israeli
coletiva
civilians
de
has
todo
become a
o
collective
povo
punishment
palestino.
for the entire
São mais
Palestinian
de
people.
40 mil vítimas
They
fatais,
have been over
em sua maioria
40,000 fatal
mulheres e
victims,
crianças.
mostly women and
O direito de
children.
defesa
The right to
transformou-se
defense
no
has
direito de
become the
vingança,
right to
que
vengeance,
impede
which
acordo
prevents
para a
an
liberação de
agreement for the
reféns
release of
e adia o
hostages
cessar-fogo.
and postpones the ceasefire.
Conflitos esquecidos no Sudão
Forgotten
e no Iêmen
conflicts in Sudan
impõem
and Yemen
sofrimento atroz
are causing
a quase 30
excruciating
milhões
suffering
de
to
pessoas.
nearly 30 million
Este ano,
people. This
o
year,
número dos que
the number
necessitam
of
de ajuda
people in
humanitária
need
no
of
mundo
humanitarian aid
chegará
in the
a
world will reach
300 milhões de
300
pessoas.
million.
Em tempos de
In
crescente
times of
polarização,
increasing
expressões como
polarization, expressions
desglobalização
such as
se tornaram
deglobalization and
corriqueiras.
decoupling
Mas
have
é
become
impossível
commonplace, but it is
desplanetizar
impossible
nossa
to
vida em comum.
deplanetize our
Estamos
lives together.
condenados à
We're doomed to climate
interdependência
change,
da mudança
interdependence.
climática. O planeta
The
já não
planet is no
espera
longer
para cobrar da
waiting to
próxima
demand
geração
payment for the
e
next
está
generation
farto de
and
acordos
is fed up with
climáticos que não são
unfulfilled
cumpridos.
climate agreements.
Está cansado
It's
de
tired
meta de redução
of
de emissão
neglected
de
carbon
carbono
reduction
negligenciadas do auxílio
and
financeiro
financial aid to
aos
poor
países
countries that
pobres
does
que nunca
not
chega.
arrive.
O negacionismo
Denialism
sucumbe
succumbs
ante as
to
evidências
evidence
do
of
aquecimento
global
global.
warming.
2024 caminha para ser o
is on
ano
track
mais
to be the
quente da
hottest
história
year
moderna.
in modern history.
Furacões no Caribe,
Hurricanes in the
tufões na
Caribbean,
Ásia, seca e
typhoons
inundações
in
na
Asia,
África e
droughts and
chuvas
floods in
torrenciais na
Africa,
Europa
torrential
deixam
rains
um
in
rastro
Europe
de
leave
morte e
a
de
trail
destruição.
of death and
No
destruction.
sul do Brasil,
In the south of
tivemos
Brazil,
a maior
we had
enchente
the
desde
biggest flood since
1941.
1941.
A Amazônia
The Amazon
está atravessando atravessando a
is
pior estiagem
experiencing the
em
worst drought in
45 anos.
45 years.
Incêndios florestais se alastrado pelo país e já devoraram 5 milhões de hectares apenas no mês de agosto. O meu governo não terceiriza a responsabilidade e nem abdica da sua soberania. Já fizemos muito, mas sabemos que é preciso fazer muito mais. Além de enfrentar os desafios da crise climática, lutamos contra quem lucra com a degradação ambiental. Não transigiremos com litígios ambientais, com o garimpo ilegal e com o crime organizado. Reduzimos o desmatamento na Amazônia em 50% no último ano e vamos erradicá-lo até 2030. Não é mais admissível pensar em soluções para florestas tropicais sem ouvir os povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais e todos aqueles que vivem nelas. Nossa visão de desenvolvimento sustentável está alicerçada no potencial da bioeconomia. O Brasil sediará a COP30 em 2025, de que o multilateralismo é o único caminho para superar a urgência climática. Nossa contribuição nacionalmente determinada, o NDC, será apresentada ainda este ano, em linha com o objetivo de limitar o aumento da temperatura do planeta a 1,5 graus. O Brasil desponta como celeiro de oportunidade neste mundo revolucionado pela transição energética. Somos hoje um dos países com a matriz energética mais limpa do mundo. 90% da nossa eletricidade provém de fontes renováveis, como a biomassa, a hidrelétrica, a solar e a eólica. Fizemos opção pelos biocombustíveis há 50 anos, muito antes que a discussão sobre energias alternativas ganhasse tração. Estamos na vanguarda em outros nichos importantes, como o da produção do hidrogênio verde. É hora de enfrentar o debate sobre o ritmo lento da descarbonização do planeta e trabalhar por uma economia menos dependente de combustíveis. Senhor Presidente, na América Latina vive-se desde 2014, uma segunda década perdida. O crescimento médio da região nesse período foi de apenas 0,9%, metade do verificado na década perdida de 1990. Essa combinação de baixo crescimento e altos níveis de desigualdade resulta em efeitos nefastos sobre a paisagem política. Tragada por disputas muitas vezes alheias à região, nossa vocação de cooperação e entendimento se fragiliza. É injustificável manter Cuba em uma lista unilateral de estados que supostamente promovem terrorismo e impor medidas coercitivas unilaterais que penalizam indevidamente as populações mais vulneráveis. No Haiti, é inadiável conjugar ações para restaurar a ordem pública e promover o desenvolvimento. No Brasil, a defesa da democracia implica ação permanente anti-investidas extremistas, messiânicas e totalitárias que espalham o ódio, a intolerância e o ressentimento. Brasileiras e brasileiros continuarão a derrotar os que tentam solapar as instituições e colocá-las a serviço de interesses nacionais. A democracia precisa responder às legítimas aspirações dos que não aceitam mais a fome, a desigualdade, o desemprego e a violência. No mundo globalizado, não faz sentido recorrer a falsos patriotas e isolacionistas. Tampouco a esperança no recurso a experiências ultraliberais que apenas agravam as dificuldades de um continente depauperado. O futuro de nossa região passa, sobretudo, por construir um Estado sustentável, eficiente, inclusivo e que enfrente todas as formas de discriminação, que não se intimida ante indivíduos, corporação ou plataformas digitais que se julgam acima da lei. A liberdade é a primeira vítima de um mundo sem regras. Elementos essenciais da soberania incluem o direito de legislar, julgar
includes
disputas e
the
fazer
right to
cumprir as
prescribe
regras
laws,
dentro de seu território,
adjudicate disputes and
incluindo
enforce
o
rules
ambiente digital.
within one's
O
territory,
Estado que
including the
estamos
digital
construindo
environment. The
é
state we are
sensível
building is
às
sensitive to
necessidades
the
dos mais
needs of the most
vulneráveis,
vulnerable
sem abdicar
without
de
giving up
fundamentos
sound
macroeconômicos
macroeconomic foundations.
A falsa
The
oposição
false opposition
entre o
between
Estado e
state and
mercado
market
foi abandonada
was
pelas
abandoned
nações
by
desenvolvidas
developed
que voltaram a
nations
praticar
which returned
políticas
to
industriais
practice
ativas e fortes
active
e
industrial
forte
policies
regulação
and strong
da
regulation
economia
of the
doméstica.
domestic economy.
Na área da negligência
In
da
the area of
inteligência
artificial
artificial,
intelligence,
vivenciamos a
we are
consolidação
experiencing
de
the
assimetrias que
consolidation of the
levam a
asymmetries that
verdadeiro
lead to a true
oligopólio do
knowledge
saber. Avança a
oligopoly.
concentração
The
sem precedentes
unprecedented
na mão de pequeno
concentration in the
número
hands
de
of a small
pessoas
number
e
of
de
people and
empresas
companies
sediadas em número ainda
based
menor de
in an
países.
even smaller number of
Interessa-nos
countries is
uma
advancing.
inteligência
We are
artificial
interested in
emancipadora, que também tem a cara do
artificial
sul
intelligence,
global
which
e que
also has the face
fortaleça a
of the global
diversidade
south
cultural,
and which
que
strengthens
respeita os
cultural
direitos
diversity,
humanos,
that
proteja dados
respects human
pessoais
rights,
e
protects
promova a
personal data and
integridade
promotes
da
information
informação. E,
integrity,
sobretudo,
and
que
above
seja
all,
ferramenta
that it will
para
be
a
a
paz,
tool for
não para a
peace,
guerra.
not for war.
Necessitamos de uma governança
We need an
intergovernamental da
intergovernmental
inteligência
governance of
artificial,
artificial
em que
intelligence,
todos os
in which
estados
all
tenham
states
acesso.
have a seat.
Senhor presidente,
Mr. President,
as condições para acesso a
conditions for
recursos financeiros
accessing financial
seguem
resources
proibitivas para a
remain
maioria dos países de renda
prohibitive
baixa
for
e
most
média.
low and
O
middle
fardo
income
da
countries.
dívida limita o
The
espaço
debt
fiscal
burden limits
para
fiscal
investir
room
em
to
saúde e
invest in
educação,
health and
reduzir
education,
as desigualdades
reduce
e
inequalities,
enfrentar a
and
mudança do
address
clima.
climate change.
Países da
African
África tomam
countries
empréstimo a
borrow
taxas até
at
8
rates up
vezes
to
maiores
8 times
que a
higher
Alemanha
than Germany
e 4
and
vezes
4
maior do que
times
os
higher
Estados
than the
Unidos.
United States.
É um plano Marshall
It's a
às
Marshall
avessas,
Plan in
em que os
reverse,
mais pobres
in which the
financiam
poorest
os mais
finance
ricos.
the richest.
Sem maior
Without
participação
greater
dos países em
participation
desenvolvimento
of the
na
developing
direção
countries
do FMI
in the
e do
management
Banco
of the
Mundial,
IMF and the World
não
Bank, there
haverá
will be no
mudança
effective
efetiva.
change.
Enquanto os objetivos
While
do
the Sustainable
desenvolvimento
Development
sustentável
Goals
ficam para trás,
lag
as
behind,
150
the
maiores
world's
empresas do mundo
150
obtiveram
largest
juntas
companies
um
had
lucro de
collectively made
trilhão
up
e
to
800
$1
bilhões de dólares nos
trillion
últimos 2 anos.
in profits over
A
the
fortuna
last
dos
2
5
years.
principais
The fortunes of the
bilionários
top
mais
5
que dobrou
billionaires
desde o
have
início
more
dessa
than
década,
doubled since the
ao
start of this
passo
decade,
que
while
60% da
60% of
humanidade
humanity
ficou
has
mais
become
pobre.
poor.
Os super ricos
The super rich
pagam
pay
proporcionalmente
proportionally
muito menos
much
impostos
less
do que a
tax
classe
than the working
trabalhadora.
class.
Para corrigir essa
remedy
anomalia,
this anomaly,
o Brasil tem insistido
Brazil
na
has
cooperação
insisted on
internacional
international
para
cooperation
desenvolver
to develop
padrões mínimos de
minimum
tributação
global
global.
taxation
Os
standards.
dados divulgados há 2
The
meses
data
pela
released
FAO
by
sobre o
FAO 2
estado
months
da
ago on
insegurança
the state
alimentar
of
no
food
mundo
insecurity in the
são
world is
estarrecedores.
shocking.
O número de
The number
pessoas
of people
passando
going
fome ao redor do
hungry
planeta
around the world
aumentou em
has
mais de
increased by more than
152 milhões
152
desde
million
2019.
since 2019.
Isso significa
This
que
means
9%
that
da
9%
população
of the
mundial,
world's population,
733
733
milhões de
million
pessoas,
people, are
estão subnutridas.
undernourished.
O problema é
The
especialmente
problem
grave
is
na África e
severe in
na
Africa
Ásia, mas ele
and
também
Asia, but it
persiste
also
em partes
persists
da
in
América
parts of
Latina.
Latin America.
Mulheres e
Women
meninas
and
são as
girls
maiores,
make up the majority
são as vítimas maiores de pessoas em situação
of
de
people
fome no
facing
mundo.
hunger in the world.
Pandemias,
Pandemics,
conflitos
armed
armados,
conflicts,
eventos climáticos
climate
e
events,
subsídios
and agricultural
agrícolas dos países
subsidies from
ricos
rich countries
ampliam
are
o alcance
increasing the
desse
scope
flagelo.
of this scourge.
Mas a fome
But
não é
hunger
resultado
is not
apenas de
just the
fatores
result of
externos.
external factors.
Ela decorre
It
sobretudo
arises above
de
all
escolhas políticas.
from political
Hoje,
choices. Today,
o mundo produz
the world
alimentos mais
produces
do que
more than enough
suficiente para
food to
erradicar.
eradicate
O
it.
que falta
What is
é criar
missing is
condições
for
de acesso
conditions
aos
to be
alimentos.
created so that food may be
Esse é o
affordable.
compromisso mais
This is
urgente
my
do meu
government's
governo.
most urgent
Acabar com
commitment.
a fome no
End
Brasil,
hunger in
como
Brazil
fizemos em
as we did in
2014.
2014.
Só em
In
2023,
23
retiramos
alone,
24
we
milhões e
lifted 24
400
million
mil
and
pessoas da
400,000
condição
people
de
out of a
insegurança
condition of
alimentar
severe
severa.
food insecurity.
A Aliança
The
Global
Global Alliance
contra a fome e a
Against Hunger
pobreza,
and
que
Poverty,
lançaremos
which we
no
will
Rio
launch
de
in
Janeiro
Rio
em
de Janeiro
novembro,
in
nasce
November,
dessa vontade
was born
política
from this
e
political
desse
will
espírito de
and this spirit of
solidariedade. Ela
solidarity.
será dos
It will be
principais
one of the main
resultados da
results
presidência
of
brasileira
the
do
Brazilian
G20
G20
e está
chairmanship
aberta
and
a
is open
todos os
to the
países do
world.
mundo. Todos os que queiram se
Anyone who
somar a
wants
este
to join
esforço
this
coletivo
collective effort
serão muito
is
bem-vindos.
welcome.
Senhor Presidente,
Mr. President,
senhoras
ladies and
e
gentlemen,
senhores, prestes a completar
about to turn
80 anos,
80,
a
the
Carta
United
das
Nations
Nações
Charter
Unidas nunca
has
passou
never
por uma reforma
undergone
urgente.
comprehensive reform.
Apenas 4 emendas foram
4
aprovadas,
amendments
todas
were
elas
passed,
entre
all of them between
1965 e
1965 and 1973.
A versão atual
The
da Carta
Charter's
não
current
trata de
version
alguns dos
fails
desafios
to address
mais
some of
dementes
humanity's
da
most
humanidade.
pressing
Na
challenges.
fundação da ONU,
When the UN was
éramos
founded, we
51
were
países.
51 countries.
Hoje,
We are
somos
now
193.
193
Várias
countries.
nações,
Several
principalmente no
countries,
continente
mainly on the African
africano,
continent,
estavam sob o domínio
were under
colonial
colonial
e não tiveram
rule
voz sobre
when the
seus
UN was
objetivos
founded and
e
had no
funcionamento.
say over its
E
goals
não
and functioning.
existe equilíbrio
There
de
is
gênero no
no
exercício
gender balance
das
in the
mais
highest
altas
positions.
funções. O cargo
The
de
position of
secretário-geral
Secretary-General
jamais
has never
foi
been
ocupado
held
por
by
uma
a
mulher.
woman.
Estamos chegando
We are approaching
ao final do
the
primeiro
end
quarto
of
do
the
século
first quarter of the
XXI,
21st
com as
century,
Nações
with the
Unidas cada
United
vez mais
Nations increasingly
esvaziadas
empty
e
and
paralisadas.
paralyzed.
É hora de
It is
reagir
time to
com vigor
react
a essa
vigorously
situação,
to this situation,
restituindo à
restoring to the
organização
organization
as
the
prerrogativas que
prerogatives
decorrem
that
da
derive
sua
from its
condição
status as a
de fórum
universal
universal.
forum.
Não bastam ajustes
One-off
pontuais.
adjustments are not enough.
Precisamos
We need
contemplar
to
uma
think about
ampla revisão da Carta.
review and revising
Sua
the Charter
reforma deve
comprehensively. The
compreender
reform
os
should include
seguintes
the
objetivos:
following goals.
a transformação do Conselho
Transforming the
Econômico
Economic
e
and Social
Social
Council
no principal
into the
fórum
main
para o
forum
tratamento
for
do
dealing with
desenvolvimento
sustainable
sustentável
development
e do combate à
and the
mudança
fight
climática
against climate
com
change
capacidade
with a real
real
capacity
de inspirar
to
as
inspire
instituições
financial
financeiras.
institutions.
A revitalização do papel
Revitalizing
da
the role
Assembleia
of the General
Geral,
Assembly,
inclusive em temas de
including
paz e
in matters
segurança
of international
internacionais.
peace and
O
security.
fortalecimento
Strengthening
da
of
Comissão de
the
Consolidação da
Peace
Paz.
Building Commission.
A reforma do Conselho
Reform of
de
the
Segurança
Security Council,
com foco em sua
focusing on
composição,
its composition,
método de
working
trabalho,
methods and
direito de
veto
veto,
powers
de modo a
in order to
torná-la
make it
mais
more
eficaz e
effective and
representativa das
representative
realidades
of
contemporâneas.
contemporary
A
realities.
exclusão
Excluding
da América
Latin
Latina e da África de
America
assentos
and Africa from
permanentes
the
no
permanent
Conselho de
seats of the
Segurança é
Security
eco
Council is
inaceitável
an
de práticas
unacceptable
de
echo of
dominação
domination
do passado
practices from the
colonial.
colonial past.
Vamos promover essa discussão
I have-
de forma transparente.
Let's promote this discussion in a transparent way.
Vamos promover essa
Let's
discussão de
promote
forma
this
transparente,
discussion in a
em
transparent
consulta no
way,
G77,
in
no
consultation
G20,
with the
nos
G77,
BRICS,
the G20,
na
the
CELAC,
BRICS,
no CARICOM
in
e
the
tantos
CARICOM,
outros
at
espaços
the
que
UE,
existem
and any
para
other
discutir.
spaces that exist.
Não tem ilusões
I
sobre a
have no illusions
complexidade de
about
uma
the
reforma
complexity
como
of a
essa,
reform
que
like
enfrentará
this,
interesses
which will face
cristalizados de
crystallized interests
manutenção do
in
status
maintaining
quo.
the status quo.
Exigirá
It will
enorme esforço
require
de
enormous
negociação,
negotiation
mas essa
effort.
é a nossa
But that is our
responsabilidade.
responsibility.
Não podemos
We
esperar
cannot wait
por outra
for
tragédia
another
mundial,
world
como a
tragedy
Segunda
like
Grande
the
Guerra,
World War
para só
II,
então
to
construir
only
sobre
then
seus
build
escombros
a
uma
new
nova
governance
governança
on its
global.
rubbles.
A vontade da
The
maioria
will
pode
of the majority
persuadir
can
os que
persuade
se apegam às
those
expressões
who
cruas
cling
dos
to the
mecanismos
raw
de poder.
expression of the
Neste
mechanisms of
plenário,
power.
ecoam as aspirações
The
de toda a
humanities
humanidade.
aspirations equal in
Aqui,
this plenary.
travamos os
Here,
grandes debates do mundo.
engage in the world's
Neste
big
fórum,
debates. In this
buscamos
forum,
as
we
respostas
look for
para os
answers
problemas
to
que
the
afligem o
problems
planeta.
inflicted on the
Recai
world.
sobre a Assembleia Geral,
It is
expressão
up to the
maior do
General Assembly, the
multilateralismo.
biggest expression of
A missão de
multilateralism, the mission
pavimentar
to pave
o
the way
caminho
for
para
the future.
Muito obrigado
Thank you
e boa
very
sorte.
much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, so they're checking a few things before he's here. But I think they're checking a few things. I don't know.
just arriving, another minute.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
My fellow leaders, today is the fourth time I've had the great honor of speaking to this Assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple, without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We needed to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq, and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well. To face the future, I was also determined to rebuild my country's alliances and partnerships to a level not previously seen. We did just that, from traditional treaty alliances to new partnerships like the Quad with the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward. In 1919, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats described a world, and I quote, "where things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world," end of quote. Some may say those words describe the world not just in 1919, but in 2024. But I see a critical distinction. In our time, the center has held. Leaders and people from every region and across the political spectrum have stood together, turned the page. We turned the page on the worst pandemic in a century. We made sure COVID no longer controls our lives. We defended the UN Charter and ensured the survival of Ukraine as a free nation. My country made the largest investment in climate, clean energy, ever anywhere in history. There will always be forces that pull our countries apart and the world apart. Aggression, extremism, chaos, and cynicism. A desire to retreat from the world and go it alone. Our test, is to make sure that the forces holding us together are stronger than those who are pulling us apart. That the principles of partnership that we came here each year to uphold can withstand the challenges. That the center holds once again. My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history, where the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come. Will we stand behind the principles that unite us? Will we stand firm against aggression? Will we end the conflicts that are raging today? Will we take on global challenges like climate change, hunger, and disease? Will we plan now for the opportunities and risk of a revolutionary new technologies? I want to talk today about each of these decisions and the actions, in my view, we must take. To start, each of us in this body has made a commitment to the principles of the UN Charter to stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution was supposed to stand for. And so, my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners in 50-plus nations stood up as well. But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, and more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine. Not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter. We also need to uphold our principles as we seek to responsibly manage the competition with China so it does not veer into conflict. We stand ready to cooperate on urgent challenges for the good of our people and the people everywhere. We recently resumed cooperation with China to stop the flow of deadly synthetic narcotics. I appreciate the collaboration. It matters for the people of my country and many others around the world. On matters of conviction, the United States is unabashed, pushing back against unfair economic competition against military coercion of other nations in the South China Sea, and maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and protecting our most advanced technologies so they cannot be used against us or any of our partners. At the same time, we're going to continue to strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. These partnerships are not against any nation. They're building blocks for a free, open, secure, and peaceful Indo-Pacific. We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands killed, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They did not ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas' grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, during the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. Full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own. Progress toward peace will put us in a stronger position to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Iran. Together we must deny oxygen to its terrorist proxies, which have called for more October 7th and ensure that Iran will never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon. Gaza is not the only conflict that deserves our outrage. In Sudan, a bloody civil war unleashed one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 8 million on the brink of famine. Hundreds of thousands already there. Atrocities in Darfur and elsewhere. The United States has led the world in providing humanitarian aid to Sudan. And with our partners, we've led diplomatic talks to try to silence the guns and avert a wider famine. The world needs to stop arming the generals, to speak with one voice and tell them, stop tearing your country apart, stop blocking aid to the Sudanese people, end this war now. But people need more than the absence of war. They need a chance to live in dignity. They need to be protected from the ravages of climate change, hunger, and disease. Our administration has invested over $150 billion to make progress and other sustainable development goals. It includes $20 billion for food security, and over $50 billion for global health. We've mobilized billions more in private sector investment. We've taken the most ambitious climate action in history. We've moved to rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one. And today, my country is finally on track to cut emissions in half by 2030. On track to honor my pledge to quadruple climate financing to developing nations with $11 billion thus far this year. We've rejoined the World Health Organization, donating nearly 700 million doses of COVID vaccine to 117 countries. We must now move quickly to face Mpox outbreak in Africa. We're prepared to commit $500 million to help African countries prevent and respond to Mpox and to donate 1 million doses of Mpox vaccine now. We call on our partners to match our pledge and make this a billion-dollar commitment to the people of Africa. Beyond the core necessities of food and health, the United States, the G7, and our partners have embarked on an ambitious initiative to mobilize and deliver significant finance to the developing world. We're working to help countries build out their infrastructure, to clean energy transition, to their digital transformation, to lay new economic foundations for a prosperous future. It's called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. We've already started to see the fruits of this emerge in Southern Africa and Southeast Asia and in the Americas. We have to keep it going. I want to get things done together. In order to do that, we must build a stronger, more effective, and more inclusive United Nations. The UN needs to adapt and bring new voices and new perspectives. That's why we support reforming and expanding the membership of the UN Security Council. Our UN ambassador just laid out our detailed vision to reflect today's world, not yesterday's. It's time to move forward. The Security Council, like the UN itself, needs to go back to the job of making peace, of brokering deals to end wars and suffering. And to stop the spread of the most dangerous weapons, of stabilizing troubled regions in East Africa, from East Africa to Haiti, to Kenya-led mission that's working alongside the Haitian people to turn the tide. We also have a responsibility to prepare our citizens for the future. We'll see more technological change, I argue, in the next 2 to 10 years than we have in the last 50 years. Artificial intelligence is going to change our ways of life, our ways of work, and our ways of war. It could usher in scientific progress at a pace never seen before, and much of it could make our lives better. But AI also brings profound risks, from deep fakes to disinformation, to novel pathogens, to bioweapons. We've worked at home and abroad to define the new norms and standards. This year, we achieved the first ever General Assembly resolution on AI to start developing global rules of the road. We also announced a declaration on responsible use of AI, joined by 60 countries in this chamber. But let's be honest, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we need to do to manage this new technology. Nothing is certain about how AI will evolve or how it will be deployed. No one knows all the answers. My fellow leaders, it's with humility I offer 2 questions. First, how do we as an international community govern AI? As countries and companies race to uncertain frontiers, we need an equally urgent effort to ensure AI's safety, security, and trustworthiness. As AI grows more powerful, it also must grow more responsive to our collective needs and values. Benefits of all must be shared equitably. It should be harnessed to narrow, not deepen, digital divides. Second, will we ensure that AI supports rather than undermines the core principles that human life has value and all humans deserve dignity. We must make certain that the awesome capabilities of AI will be used to uplift and empower everyday people, not to give dictators more powerful shackles on the human spirit. In the years ahead, there may well be no greater test of our leadership than how we deal with AI. Let me close with this. Even as we navigate so much change, one thing must not change. We must never forget who we're here to represent. We the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people. It's your people that matter the most. Never forget, we are here to serve the people, not the other way around. Because the future will be won by those who unleash the full potential of their people, to breathe free, to think freely, to innovate, to educate, to live and love openly without fear. That's the soul of democracy. It does not belong to any one country. I've seen it all around the world, and the brave men and women who ended apartheid, brought down the Berlin Wall, fight today for freedom and justice and dignity. We saw it, that universal yearning for rights and freedom in Venezuela, where millions cast their vote for change that hadn't been recognized. But it can't be denied. The world knows the truth. We saw it in Uganda, LGBT activists demanding safety and recognition of their common humanity. We see it in citizens across the world peacefully choosing their future. From Ghana to India to South Korea, nations representing 1/4 of humanity who will hold elections this year alone. It's remarkable, the power of we the people, that makes me more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. Since I was first elected to the United States Senate in 1972, every age faces its challenges. I saw it as a young man. I see it today. But we are stronger than we think. We're stronger together than alone. And what the people call impossible is just an illusion. Nelson Mandela taught us, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done. It always seems impossible until it's done." My fellow leaders, there is nothing that's beyond our capacity if we work together. Let's work together. God bless you all, and may God protect all those who seek peace. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America. May I request representatives to remain seated while we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes before resuming to hear the next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Senhoras e senhores, retomam seus assentos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. That's disorderly. Okay. The meeting is resumed. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Sayın Başkan, değerli
Mr. President,
devlet ve hükümet
dear
başkanları,
heads of states and
Sayın
governments,
Genel Sekreter,
Mr. Secretary General,
kıymetli delegeler,
distinguished delegates,
sizleri şahsım,
on behalf of myself,
ülkem
my
ve
country,
milletim
and
adına
my nation,
en kalbi
I greet
duygularımla,
you with my most
saygıyla
heartfelt
selamlıyorum.
feelings and respect.
Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Kurulu'na
I'm
bugün
honored to
bir
have
kez
the
daha
opportunity
seslenme
to address
fırsatı
the
bulmaktan
United Nations General
büyük bir
Assembly
bahtiyarlık
once
duyuyorum.
again today.
79.
Well, I
Genel
hope that
Kurul'un
the
ülkelerimiz
79th General
ve
Assembly
tüm
will be
insanlık
a
için
blessing for
hayırlara
our
vesile
countries
olmasını
and for
temenni ediyorum.
the entire humanity.
Genel Kurul Başkanlığını tamamlayan
I would like to
Sayın
congratulate
Francis'i
Mr.
tebrik
Francis
ediyor.
on the completion
Bu
of
görevi
his term
devralan
as President of the
Sayın
General
Young'a
Assembly
başarılar
and wish
diliyorum.
success to Mr. Young
Uzun
as he takes
mücadeleler
over.
neticesinde dost ve kardeş Filistin'in
I would like
temsilcisini
to express
üye
here our
ülkeler
pleasure to see the
arasında hak ettiği
representative of
yerde
our friend and
görmekten
brother
duyduğumuz
Palestine in his
memnuniyeti
rightful place
burada
among the member
ifade
states
etmek
as a
istiyorum.
result of long struggles.
Atılan bu tarihi adımın
I hope that this
Filistin'in
historic step
Birleşmiş
will be
Milletler
the
üyeliğine
final
giden
turning
yolda
point on the road
artık son dönemeç olmasını
leading to Palestine's
temenni ediyorum.
membership to the United
Filistin'i
Nations.
tanımayan diğer devletleri de
The international
bu çok
community
kritik
and all
dönemde
of us in the human
tarihin
family
doğru
must
tarafında yer
fulfill
alarak
our obligation
Filistin
to the
devletini
Palestinian
bir an evvel
people
tanımaya
without further
davet
ado
ediyorum.
that haven't done
Kıymetli
already.
delegeler,
Distinguished guests,
buradaki dostlarımın çoğunun ekranlarda
I
seyrettiği
know
krizleri
there are
biz
certain
an be an
crises that
yaşıyor
you're monitoring
ve
on TV,
yönetmeye
and those are the
çalışıyoruz.
crises that we are going through
Dolayısıyla
every day, and we're
bugün
trying to manage them.
sizlere
That's why
gerilimlerin
today
uzağında değil,
I'm not
tam kalbinde yer
talking
alan bir ülkenin lideri olarak
representing a country that
sesleniyorum.
is situated far away from tensions, but
Birileri
instead
rahatsız
that is
olsa da,
found at the very
birileri
heart
şahsımızı yine hedef alacak
tension and
olsa da,
war. Some
bugün
people
burada
will be
insanlığın
critical
ortak
of us, but
kürsüsünde
despite that fact, today,
insanlık
on
adına
the common
bazı
rostrum
gerçekleri
of the
açık
human race,
açık
we will speak of the
konuşmak
truth
arzusundayız.
frankly and openly.
Bakınız, şu an
Right
çatısı
now,
altında bulunduğumuz Birleşmiş
the
Milletler,
United Nations, under the
milyonlarca
roof of which
insanın
we are
hayatını
found today,
kaybettiği İkinci Dünya Savaşı sonrasında
were established in the aftermath of the
uluslararası
Second
barışı
World War,
ve
in which millions of
güvenliği
people have lost their
korumak
lives to
amacıyla
maintain
kuruldu.
international peace and security.
Birleşmiş Milletler'in kuruluşuyla
With the
birlikte
establishment of the United
küresel
Nations,
istikrara,
expectations for
huzura
global
ve
stability,
adalete
peace
dair
and justice
beklentiler
were reborn,
yeniden yeşermiş, barış
and
umutları
hopes for
yeniden
peace were
filizlenmişti.
sprouted again.
Ancak
To put it bluntly,
üzülerek görüyoruz ki son
unfortunately,
yıllarda
in the
Birleşmiş Milletler
last
kuruluş
few years,
misyonunu ifa
the
etmekte
United Nations
yetersiz
has
kalıyor,
failed to fulfill its
giderek
founding mission
işlevsiz,
and has
hantal
gradually
ve
become a
atıl bir yapıya
dysfunctional
dönüşüyor.
structure.
Dünya beşten
The
büyük
world
bir
is bigger
şiarının
than five is
temsil
my
ettiği
motto,
değerlere
it's my credo.
bugünlerde
And
daha
this credo
fazla
represents our
ihtiyaç
common
duyuyoruz.
values and we need those values more than ever in
Uluslararası
this
barış
day
ve
and age.
güvenliğin imtiyazlı 5 ülkenin keyfine bırakılmayacak
International
kadar önemli
Justice
olduğuna
cannot be left in the
şahitlik
will
ediyoruz.
of five privileged
Bunun
member
en
states
dramatik
of the
örneği
Security Council, and the
Gazze'de
most dramatic example to that
353
is
gündür devam eden
the war,
katliamdır.
the massacre that has been going
7
on in Gaza
Ekim'den
for the
beri
last 350
aralıksız
days.
süren
And since October
İsrail
7,
saldırılarında
41,000
41 bini
Palestinians have been
aşkın
killed in
Filistinli
the
hayatını
continuous
kaybetti.
Israeli attacks.
Çoğu çocuk ve kadın,
41,000 lives,
41 bin can,
41,000 people,
41 bin
mostly
insan
children
hem
and
de
women,
acımasız bir şekilde
were ruthlessly
hayattan koparıldı.
taken away.
Yine çoğu çocuk
And
10 binden
no
fazla
one knows where
Gazze'linin
more than
nerede
10,000
olduğunu
people are, most
kimse
of which
bilmiyor.
are children.
Aynı şekilde
And likewise,
100 bine yakın insan
100,000
yaralandı,
people were
sakat
injured,
kaldı.
maimed, or they
Zor
lost their
şartlar
limbs.
altında görevini yapmaya çalışan
172
172
journalists were
gazeteci
killed while trying to do
öldürüldü.
their job under very difficult
Hayat kurtarmak için
circumstances.
çalışan
And more than
500'ü
500
aşkın
medics
sağlık
have been
görevlisi
killed while they were
öldürüldü.
trying to save lives.
Açlıkla, susuzlukla
Humanitarian
boğuşan,
aid workers
Gazze
and
halkının
United
imdadına
Nations
koşan
personnel who came to the
insani
rescue of the
yardım
people of Gaza
görevlileri,
who were struggling with
210'dan
hunger
fazla
and
Birleşmiş
thirst
Milletler
were killed.
personeli
More than
öldürüldü.
215 United Nations
Savaşta
personnel.
dahi dokunulmaması gereken
They hit marketplaces,
820
tents,
camiyi,
and camps
3
where the
kiliseyi
refugees were sheltered.
vurdular.
They hit 820 mosques
Onlarca
and 3
hastaneyi,
churches that shouldn't have been
yüzlerce
touched
okulu,
even in war.
hasta
And they
taşıyan
deliberately hit dozens
130'dan
of
fazla
hospitals,
ambulansı
hundreds of
vurdular.
schools, more than 130
Birleşmiş Milletler
ambulances carrying
kürsüsünden
patients.
Birleşmiş Milletler şartını
They
parçalayarak
shredded the charter
bir
of
de
the United
utanmadan
Nations from the
tüm
rostrum of the
dünyaya,
United Nations and
vicdan
shamelessly
sahibi tüm
challenged the whole
insanlara
world who
işte
are
buradan,
people of conscience
bu kürsüden
from this very
meydan
rostrum.
okudular.
They challenged them.
Dostlarım,
My friends,
İsrail'in temerküz kampına çevirdiği
leaked
hapishanelerinde
images from Israel's prisons,
sızan
which it
görüntüler
has turned into
nasıl bir
concentration camps,
zulümle
clearly
karşı
show
karşıya
what kind
olduğumuzu
of
çok net
barbarianism
biçimde
we are facing.
gösteriyor. İsrail'in saldırıları sonucunda
As a result of
Gazze,
Israeli attacks,
dünyanın en
Gaza
büyük çocuk
has become the
ve
world's
kadın
largest
mezarlığı haline
cemetery for
gelmiş.
women and children.
17 binden fazla çocuk
More than
İsrail'in
17,000
kurşunlarının,
children were targeted
bombalarının
by
hedefi
Israeli
oldu.
bullets and bombs.
Hint Recep
Hind Recep
sadece
was only
6 yaşındaydı.
6 years old.
Yakınlarıyla güvenli
He
bir
and his
yer
family were
ararken
seeking safety
araçları
when their car
İsrail
was
güçleri
hit
tarafından
by Israeli
vuruldu.
forces.
Dayısı,
He lost
yengesi,
everything. He lost his
kuzenleri,
mother, father,
herkes
siblings,
ölmüş.
cousins.
Sadece
He lost
o
all the hopes
hayatta kalmış.
he had packed.
tam 12 gün
And
boyunca
only he survived. He
çaresizce
waited desperately for
kurtarılmayı
rescue
bekledi.
for 12 days.
beni almaya gelecek misiniz?
Will you come to take me?
Korkuyorum
I'm fearful.
diyerek bir yardım elinin 12 gün
Was
boyunca
waiting for a
kendisine
helping hand to
uzanmasını
reach out
bekledi.
to him for
Dünyamızın
12
geldiği
days.
seviyeye,
Despite
elimizin
the level
altındaki
of our world has
teknolojiye
reached,
rağmen
despite the technology
çatısı
at our
altında
disposal,
binlerce personel
despite
çalıştıran
our organizations
devasa
with huge
bütçeli
budgets,
kuruluşlarımıza
employing
rağmen
tens of thousands of
8
personnel,
milyarlık
as a human
insanlık
family
ailesi
of
olarak
8 billion
henüz
inhabitants,
6 yaşındaki bir kız çocuğunu gözlerimizin önünde çırpınan yaralı bir serçeyi maalesef kurtaramadık. Bir lokma kuru ekmek, bir yudum su, bir tas çorba bulamadığı için bugüne kadar yüzlerce Gazze'li çocuk öldü, halen de ölüyor. Gazze'de sadece çocuklar değil, aynı zamanda Birleşmiş Milletler sistemi ölüyor. Hakikat ölüyor. Batı'nın savunduğunu iddia ettiği değerler ölüyor. İnsanlığın daha adil bir dünyada yaşama umutları tek tek ölüyor. Buradan açık açık soruyorum. Ey insan hakları örgütleri, Gazze'dekiler, Batı Şeria'dakiler insan değil mi? Filistin'deki çocukların okuma, yaşama, sokakta oynama hakkı yok mu? Ey uluslararası basın kuruluşları,
and calling out to the international press organizations. Aren't the journalists murdered by Israel on live TV your colleagues whose offices were actually raided as well? I call out to United Nations Security Council. What are you waiting for to prevent the genocide in Gaza, to put a stop to this cruelty, this barbarianism?
Filistin halkıyla birlikte kendi vatandaşlarının canını tehlikeye atan siyasi ikbali için tüm bölgeyi savaşa sürükleyen katliam şebekesini durdurmak için daha neyi bekliyorsun?
And what are you still waiting for to stop them? Putting to danger their own people and the entire region for political gain.
Ey İsrail'e kayıtsız, şartsız destek verenler, bu katliamı seyretmenin, bu vahşete ortak olmanın utancını daha ne kadar taşıyacaksınız? Kıymetli dostlarım, Gazze'de, Ramallah'ta, Lübnan'da çocuklar ölürken, bebekler göğüste can verirken, maalesef uluslararası toplumda çok kötü bir sınav vermiştir. Filistin'de yaşananlar, bakınız, çok büyük bir ahlaki çöküşün göstergesidir. Bütün dünya halklarının, ülke liderlerinin, uluslararası kuruluşların bu acı tablo üzerinde düşünmesi gerektiğine inanıyorum. Burada bir gerçeği de açık ve net söylemek istiyorum. İsrail yönetimi temel insan haklarını hiçe sayarak bir millete, bir halka karşı etnik temizlik, apaçık bir soykırım uygulamakta, topraklarını adım adım işgal etmektedir. Özgürlüğü, bağımsızlığı, en temel hakları gasp edilen Filistinliler ise son derece haklı bir biçimde bu işgale, bu etnik temizlik faaliyetlerine karşı meşru direniş haklarını kullanmaktadır. Filistin halkının topraklarını işgal edenlere karşı sergilediği haklı direniş gayrimeşru gösterilemeyecek kadar asildir, onurludur, kahramancadır. Buradan buradan bir kez daha canları pahasına vatanlarını savunan Filistinli kardeşlerimi yürekten selamlıyorum. İsrail'in Filistin halkına yönelik saldırganlığının tek nedeni bir avuç ülkenin İsrail'e olan kayıtsız şartsız desteği. İsrail üzerinde etki sahibi ülkeler tavşana kaç, tazıya tut politikasıyla bu katliama açıkça ortak oluyor. Sahne önünde güya ateşkes için uğraşanlar arka planda katliamlarını sürdürebilmesi için İsrail'e silah ve mühimmat göndermeye devam ediyor. Bu tutarsızlık ve samimiyetsizliktir.
This is
Bakınız,
insincerity.
Mayıs ayından beri gidip gelen bir kağıt var.
There's a paper that has been going
Hamas,
around back and forth since
ateşkes
May.
teklifini kabul
Hamas
ettiğini
has repeatedly declared
defalarca
its
ilan etti.
acceptance of the
Ama
ceasefire
İsrail
offer.
hükümeti
But the Israeli
işi
government
sürekli
has
yokuşa
made it
sürerek,
very clear that this is the
sürekli bir
party
bahane
that
bularak
doesn't want peace by
ateşkese en
constantly
yakın
dragging its
olduğunu,
feet, making a settlement of the
özellikle
dispute much more
müzakere
difficult,
ettiği
almost
muhatabını
impossible.
kalleşçe
Constantly finding an
öldürerek
excuse and
barışı
sneakily
istemeyen
killing
taraf
its
olduğunu
negotiating partner
çok
at the
net
time
biçimde
when it was
gösterdi.
closest to a ceasefire.
İsrail'in oyalama ve
Israel's
aldatma
stalling
hamlelerine
and deception
daha
should
fazla
not be
prim
given any more credit.
verilmemelidir. 2735
In the
sayılı
absence of the implementation,
sayılı
in the
Birleşmiş
absence of the
Milletler
implementation of
Güvenlik
UN
Konseyi
Security Council
kararının
Resolution number
uygulanmadığı bir ortamda
2735,
İsrail'e
coercive
yönelik
measures against
zorlayıcı
Israel
tedbirler
should be put
gündeme
on the
alınmalıdır.
agenda.
İsrail'in tutumu
Israel's
bir
behavior
kez daha
has once again
göstermiştir ki
demonstrated that
uluslararası
it is
toplumun
imperative for the
Filistinli
international
sivillere
community
yönelik
to
bir
develop
koruma
a protection
mekanizması
mechanism for
geliştirmesi
Palestinian
zaruridir.
civilians.
Bundan 70 sene önce
70 years ago,
nasıl Hitler
just as Hitler
insanlığın ittifakıyla
was stopped by
durdurulmuşsa,
an alliance of
Netanyahu
humanity,
ve
Netanyahu
cinayet
and his
şebekesi
murder
de
network
insanlığın
must
ittifakıyla
be stopped by an
durdurulmalıdır.
alliance of humanity.
Genel kurulun
We believe that the
1950
General
tarihli
Assembly's authority
barış
to
için birlik
recommend the use of
kararında
force, as in
mevcut
the
olduğu
1950
gibi
resolution on
kuvvet
unity for
kullanma
peace
tavsiyesinde
should
bulunma
be
yetkisinin
considered
bu süreçte
in this
mutlaka
process
değerlendirilmesi
during this
gerektiğine
time.
inanıyoruz. Acil
An
ve
immediate
kalıcı
and a
ateşkes
permanent
sağlanmalı.
ceasefire must be established.
Rehine,
Hostages
mahkum
and
takası
prisoners must be
gerçekleştirilmeli.
exchanged.
İnsani
And
yardımlar
humanitarian aid
engelsiz
must be delivered
ve
to
kesintisiz
Gaza
olarak
unhindered
Gazze'ye
and uninterrupted.
ulaştırılmalıdır. Bilhassa
It's very,
şartların
very
iyice
important
kötüleşeceği kış mevsiminden
that
önce
we extend a helping
çok
hand
zor
to the
koşullar
people of
altında
Gaza, especially
hayatta
before the
kalmaya
winter
çalışan
season, when
Gazze
conditions on the
halkına
ground will become even more
yardım eli
challenging.
uzatmamız şarttır. Bakınız
Look,
şu an
right now,
Gazze'deki su kaynaklarının
70% of the water
%70'i
supplies and
fırınların
75% of the
%75'i
bakeries in
tahrip
Gaza
edildi.
have been destroyed.
Sağlık merkezlerinin %95'i
95% of
kısmen
health centers were
veya
partially
tamamen
or completely
zarar
damaged.
gördü. 150.000 konut tamamen,
150,000 houses were
200.000
completely
konut
destroyed.
kısmen yıkıldı.
200,000 houses were
80.000
partially
konut
destroyed. And
oturulamaz hale
80,000
geldi.
houses become
Çocuk felci,
uninhabitable.
hepatit başta
Infectious
olmak
diseases
üzere
such as polio and
bulaşıcı hastalıklar
hepatitis are
giderek
on the
artıyor.
rise.
Gazze halkı
The people of
ihtiyacı
Gaza
olan
receive
yardım
only a quarter
miktarının
of the aid they
dörtte
urgently
birine
need.
ancak ulaşabiliyor.
That's what they
Türkiye
have
olarak
access to.
İlk günden
And as
itibaren
Turkey,
Filistinli
we
kardeşlerimize
have been
yönelik
providing humanitarian
insani
aid
yardım
to our brothers and
faaliyetlerimizi
sisters
sürdürüyoruz.
in Palestine, and we
60
will
bin
keep
tonu
on
aşan
doing that.
yardım miktarıyla Türkiye Gazze'ye en fazla yardım
With more
gönderen
than 60,000
ülke
tons of
konumunda.
aid, Turkey is the
Aynı
country
şekilde
sending the largest amount of aid
İsrail'le
to
olan
Gaza.
ticari işlemleri
Likewise, by
durdurarak
halting commercial
bu
transactions
konudaki
with Israel, we
hassasiyetimizi
have demonstrated our
ortaya koyduk.
stance on this issue.
İsrail'in son günlerde
Now,
saldırılarını artırdığı Lübnan
during
halkının
the last
ve
couple of weeks,
hükümetinin de
attacks by
yanındayız.
Israel have been
Artık hepimiz
increased in
şu
Lebanon, and we are
gerçeği
by the side of Lebanese people and the Lebanese government.
Şu gerçeği görebiliyoruz.
We can see this truth for what it
41
is.
bin insanı katledenler,
Those who murdered
talimatı
41,000
verenden
people
tetiğini
cannot
çekene,
rest until
bombayı
those who
bırakana
gave the
kadar
orders, pulled the trigger,
işledikleri suçların
and dropped the
hesabını
bombs are
vermeden
held accountable
vicdanlar
for their
rahata
crimes. We will
kavuşamaz.
not heave a sigh of relief.
Yıkılan,
Our conscience
yok
will not
edilen,
go silent.
enkaza çevrilen şehirlerde oluşan
The bill for the
milyarlarca
billions of
dolarlık
dollars
hasarın
of damage
faturası
caused in the cities that have been
faillerden
destroyed,
mutlaka
red and reduced to
tazmin
rubble, must
edilmelidir
and will
ve
be
edilecektir.
compensated by the perpetrators.
İsrail'in işlediği suçların cezasız kalmaması için Güney Afrika Cumhuriyeti tarafından Uluslararası Adalet Divanı'nda açılan davayı destekliyoruz. Müdahillik başvurusunda bulunduğumuz bu davada adaletin tecelli etmesi için gereken her türlü adımı atacağız. Nablus'ta barışçıl bir protesto eylemi sırasında İsrail askerleri tarafından başından vurulan Ayşenur Ezgi Eygi kızımızın da kanının yerde kalmaması için her türlü hukuki mücadeleyi veriyoruz, vereceğiz. Gazze'de ateşkes acil ihtiyaç olsa da asıl sorun Filistin topraklarının İsrail tarafından işgal edilmesidir. 1967 sınırları temelinde başkenti Doğu Kudüs olan bağımsız, egemen ve coğrafi bütünlüğü haiz bir Filistin devletinin vücut bulması artık daha fazla ertelenemez. İlk kıblemiz Mescid-i Aksa'ya ve Harem-i Şerif'e yönelik artan saldırıları da yakından takip ettiğimizin bilinmesini isterim. Tüm bunları söylerken Tayyip Erdoğan olarak bu kürsüde hamasetin diliyle konuşmuyorum. Burada tarihimden, ecdadımın vicdanlı, adaletli duruşundan aldığım cesaretle konuşuyorum. Çünkü biz tarih boyunca daima mazlumun yanında, zalimin ve zulmün karşısında olmuş bir milletiz. Bundan 500 yıl önce Engizisyon'dan kaçan Musevilere de, Hitler'in toplama kamplarından kaçan Yahudilere de bizim ülke ve millet olarak açık söylüyorum. İsrail halkına yönelik herhangi bir düşmanlığımız yok. Müslümanların sırf inançlarından dolayı hedef alınmasına nasıl karşıysak, antisemitizme de aynı şekilde karşıyız. Sorunumuz İsrail hükümetinin katliam politikalarıyladır. Sorunumuz tıpkı 5 asır önce olduğu gibi yine zalimle ve zulümle. Şunu herkes bilsin ki biz hakkı haykırmaktan çekinmeyiz. Birileri rahatsız olsa da doğruları söylemekten korkmayız. İnşallah sonuna kadar haklının yanında durmaya, doğru bildiklerimizi acı da olsa söylemeye devam edeceğiz. Buradan inanç, ülke, din ayrımı yapmadan Filistin halkıyla dayanışma sergileyen, hemen her hafta sokakları doldurarak Gazze'deki katliam karşısında sesini yükselten tüm yürekli insanlara, özellikle üniversiteli gençlere teşekkür ediyorum. Kıymetli delegeler, İhtilafın 14. yılında Suriye'de maalesef istikrardan hala uzaktır. Terör ve bölücü örgütlerin pençesindeki ülkede ekonomik ve insani durum vehametini koruyor. 22-54 sayılı Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi kararı temelinde siyasi sürecin ilerletilmesini ve milli uzlaşının sağlanmasını temenni ediyoruz. Gerçekçi bir diyalogtan yana olan tutumumuzu samimiyetle sürdürme kararlılığındayız. Komşumuz Irak, terörle mücadelesini sürdürürken kalkınma, yeniden imar ve bölgesiyle yeniden bütünleşme yolunda kararlı adımlar atıyor. Uluslararası toplum Irak'ın bu gayretlerine destek vermeli.
efforts.
kalkınma yolu projesi gibi
In this
tüm
context,
bölgeye
it is important
fayda
to
sağlayacak
implement
girişimlerin
initiatives such as the
hayata
Development
geçirilmesi
Road Project,
bu
which will
bağlamda
benefit the entire
çok ama
region on a
çok
win-win
önemlidir.
basis.
Tüm bu çabaların başarısı
The success of all these
PKK
efforts
başta olmak
depend
üzere
on the complete
Irak'taki
elimination
terör
of the terrorist
tehdidinin
threat in
bertaraf
Iraq, in
edilmesine bağlı.
particular the PKK.
Bir diğer komşumuz İran'la kapsamlı
We are
ortak eylem planını canlandırma
strengthening
yolunda adımlar
Common
atılmasını,
action plan with another
bölgede
neighbor of
güven
ours, Iran,
ve
in the
istikrar
region in
ortamının
order to establish
tesisine
stability and
katkı
peace.
sağlayacağına inanıyorum.
It's going to contribute
Ukrayna'daki
tremendously to our
savaş
efforts.
3. yılını bitirirken
war in Ukraine
adil ve kalıcı bir barışın tesisinden
has been going
hala
on for 3
uzaktayız.
years, and we are still away from
Silahlanma yarışı
establishing a
hızlandıkça
permanent peace and stability.
diplomasinin alanı
As the
giderek
arms race
daralıyor.
accelerates, the space for diplomacy
Savaşın
is shrinking.
Ukrayna'nın toprak bütünlüğü
It's
ve
very
egemenliği
important
temelinde diplomasi ve
that
diyalogla
diplomacy and
sona
dialogue
erdirilmesine
will
yönelik çabalara
ensure
olan
territorial
desteğimizi
integrity and
daha da
sovereignty of Ukraine,
artıracağız.
and our support for those
Yine bu
endeavors
süreçte
of Turkey will continue
Montreux
even
Boğazlar
strongly.
Sözleşmesi'ni
And again, during this
titizlikle
process,
uygulamaya
we are
devam
determined
edeceğiz.
to implement the
Azerbaycan
Montreux Convention on
ve
the Straits.
Ermenistan arasındaki barış sürecini destekliyor.
We will rigorously
Çalışmaların
implement the
en
Montreux
kısa
Convention.
sürede
We support the peace
müjdeli
process between
haberlerle
Azerbaijan and
neticelenmesini
Armenia and hope that this
temenni
process will
ediyoruz.
be concluded as soon as possible
Türkiye,
with good news.
Ermenistan kulvarında da karşılıklı
We support
olumlu adımlar
continued
atıyoruz.
high-level contacts between the two
Azerbaycan,
countries.
Ermenistan barış sürecinde
And we are focusing on
kaydedilebilecek
dialogue.
gelişmeler, Türkiye, Ermenistan normalleşme sürecine de
Armenia,
olumlu
we are
yansıyacak.
also taking positive steps
Değerli
on
dostlar,
that track to progress in
ayrılmaz bir
the
parçası
Azerbaijan-Armenia
olduğumuz
peace process will have a
Balkanların
positive impact
refah
on the
ve
Turkey-Armenia
huzuru için
normalization process.
yapıcı rol oynuyor.
Dear friends, we play a
Bölgedeki
constructive
tüm
role for the
aktörlerle
prosperity and
yakın
peace
işbirliği
at the
içinde
Balkans,
hareket
of which
ediyoruz.
we are an integral
Bosna
part.
Hersek'in
And we
egemenliği,
act in close cooperation
siyasi
with all
birliği
actors in the region.
ve toprak bütünlüğünün önemini Barışı Uygulama Konseyi Yönlendirme
As a
Kurulu
member of
üyesi
the
olarak
Steering Committee for
her
Peace
platformda
Implementation Council, we
vurguluyor,
emphasize the
U4
importance of the
ALT
sovereignty,
harekatına
political
olan
unity and territorial
katkımıza
integrity of Bosnia and
özellikle
Herzegovina
devam
on every
ediyoruz.
platform and continue
Geçen
our
yıl
contribution to
üstlendiğimiz
Operation UFOR
KFOR
Althea.
komutanlığını
We are
başarılı bir
successfully
şekilde
continuing
sürdürüyor.
the Key 4
Belgrad,
Command we
Priştine
assumed last year
diyalog
and
sürecini
supporting the
destekliyoruz.
Belgrade-Pristina
Ege Denizi
dialogue process.
ve Doğu Akdeniz'i
We
ilgili
want to
tüm
see the
tarafların
Aegean Sea
meşru
and the Eastern
menfaatlerine saygı
Mediterranean
duyulan
as a zone of
bir
stability
istikrar
and prosperity
ve
where
refah
the legitimate
bölgesi olarak
interests of all the
görmek
parties
istiyoruz.
are concerned
Deniz
can
yetki
be
alanlarının
respected.
uluslararası hukuka göre
It is in the common
sınırlandırılması,
interest of the
seyir
entire
sefer
region
serbestisi
to enhance
ve
cooperation,
emniyetiyle deniz
particularly on
ticareti
the
konuları başta olmak
delimitation
üzere
of maritime jurisdictions
işbirliğinin
in accordance with
geliştirilmesi
international law,
tüm bölgenin
freedom and safety
müşterek
of navigation
menfaatinedir.
and maritime trade.
Türkiye, enerji ve çevre başta
International
olmak
maritime
üzere
law encourages
her
cooperation
konuda
between literal
yapıcı
states in
işbirliğine hazır.
closed or semi-closed seas, such
Komşularımızdan
as the Aegean
aynı
Sea.
yaklaşımı
Turkey is ready for
bekliyoruz.
constructive cooperation
Doğu
on all issues,
Akdeniz'de en
especially
uzun
in energy and
kıyı şeridine
environment.
sahip ülke olan
We have the longest coastline
Türkiye'nin
in the Eastern
anahtar
Mediterranean,
rolü
and Turkey's
yadsınamaz.
key role is undeniable.
Kıbrıs Adası'nın kuzeyi ve batısında
Turkey has
ilan edilmiş
legitimate rights and
kıta
authorities
sahanlığında
in the western part of
Türkiye'nin
the island of
adanın
Cyprus,
tümünün
while the
etrafında
Turkish
ise
Cypriots have
Kıbrıs
legitimate
Türklerinin
rights in the
hakları
areas
vardır.
around the world.
Kıbrıs Barış Harekatı'nın
It
üzerinden
has been 50
50
years
yıl
since the Cyprus peace
Rumların
operation
ortaklık
and
devletini
61 years
gasp
since the
etmesi
Cyprus
sonucunda
issue emerged
Kıbrıs
as a result
meselesinin
of the Greek Cypriot
ortaya çıkmasının
usurpation
üzerinden
of the
ise
partnership state.
61 yıl geçti. O günden
From that
bugüne
day
kadar
until today,
adada barış
peace and
ve
tranquility
sükunet
have
hakim
prevailed
oldu.
on the island.
Kıbrıs meselesine adil, kalıcı
It was
ve
always the Turkish
sürdürülebilir
Cypriots and Turkey
bir çözüm
who put forth the
getirilmesi için
sincere will
samimi
to bring
irade
about a
ortaya koyan
just,
taraf
lasting and
daima
sustainable solution
Kıbrıs
to the
Türkleri
Cyprus
ve
issue.
Türkiye'ydi. Federasyon modeli
The federation
artık
model is now
geçerliliğini
completely
tamamen
outdated.
yitirmiştir.
And
Adada
we
iki ayrı
fully
devlet
support the vision
ve
of a
iki ayrı
two-state
halk var.
solution with two
Kıbrıs
different
Türklerinin
nations put
müktesep
forward by
hakları
the
olan
Turkish Republic of
egemen
Northern
eşitlik
Cyprus.
ve eşit uluslararası
The
statüleri
sovereign yeniden tescil edilmeli. Tecrit artık son bulmalı. Bugün uluslararası toplumu bir kez daha Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti'ni tanımaya, diplomatik, siyasi ve ekonomik ilişkiler kurmaya davet ediyoruz. Libya'da istikrarın tesisine, ülkenin birlik ve bütünlüğünün muhafazasına aktif destek sağlıyoruz. Tüm devletleri bu hassas dönemde Libya'nın yanında samimi bir şekilde yer almaya, taraflar arasında güven tesisine katkı vermeye davet ediyoruz. Sudan'daki çatışmaların sona ermesi için daha fazla çaba harcamalıyız. Çatışmalar sebebiyle yerlerinden edilmiş milyonlarca Sudanlıya insani yardım ulaştırılması noktasında hepimize sorumluluk düşüyor. Afrika genç ve dinamik nüfusu, zengin doğal kaynakları ve verimli geniş topraklarıyla çok büyük bir potansiyele sahiptir. Eşit ortaklık ve karşılıklı saygı ilkeleri temelinde Afrika halklarıyla kıtanın barış, istikrar ve kalkınma çabalarına destek veriyoruz. Afrikalı kardeşlerimizle tam bir dayanışma içinde olmayı sürdüreceğiz. ASEAN başta olmak üzere Hint Okyanusu'na kıyıdaş ülkeler birliği ve Pasifik Adaları Forumu gibi bölgesel kuruluşlarla angajmanımızı derinleştiriyoruz. Yükselen ekonomileri bir araya getiren BRICS'le ilişkilerimizi geliştirme irademizi canlı tutuyoruz. Orta Asya ülkeleriyle köklü bir tarihi paylaşıyor, işbirliğimizi ikili ve çok taraflı zeminde daha da güçlendiriyoruz. Türk Devletleri Teşkilatımız giderek bir cazibe merkezine dönüşüyor. Gözlemci üyeler Macaristan ve Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti'nin de katkılarıyla teşkilat örnek bir işbirliği modeli haline geliyor. Türk dünyası olarak birlik ve beraberliğimizi daha da tahkim edeceğiz. Çin'in egemenliğine ve toprak bütünlüğüne saygı çerçevesinde güçlü tarihi, kültürel ve beşeri bağlarımızın bulunduğu Uygur Türklerinin temel hak ve özgürlüklerinin korunması için Çin'le yakın diyalog halindeyiz. Latin Amerika ve Karayipler'deki tüm ülkelerle kurmuş olduğumuz dostane bağları daha ileri bir aşamaya taşımaya gayret ediyoruz. Kıymetli delegeler, küresel adaletsizliğin giderilmesi için birlikte çalışmak mecburiyetindeyiz. Birleşmiş Milletler sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedeflerinin kimsenin geride bırakılmaması anlayışı bu gayretler bakımından yol göstericidir. Milli gelirine oranla en fazla yardım yapan ülkelerden biri olan Türkiye'nin faaliyetleri sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedeflerine ulaşılmasına katkı sağlıyor. Üyesi olduğumuz G20 başta olmak üzere tüm uluslararası platformlarda adil, kapsayıcı, büyüme ve kalkınmayı temin edecek çalışmalara destek veriyoruz. Yapay zeka dahil çığır açan ileri teknolojilerin dönüştürücü gücünden tüm milletlerin eşit şekilde yararlanması gerektiği kanaatindeyiz. Ev sahipliği yaptığımız en az gelişmiş ülkeler için Birleşmiş Milletler Teknoloji Bankası bu yöndeki çabalarımızın somut bir tezahürü. Ancak geçtiğimiz hafta Lübnan'a yönelik gerçekleştirilen siber terör saldırıları aynı zamanda bu teknolojilerin nasıl ölümcül bir silaha dönüşebildiğini de göstermiş. İklim değişikliğini de benzer yaklaşımla ele almaktayız. I approach the climate
hiçbir
change
ülke
issue from that same
emisyon
perspective.
azaltımı
No country
ve
can tackle
iklim
emission
değişikliğine
reductions and
uyum
climate change
sürecini
adaptation
tek başına
alone.
göğüsleyemez. Gelişmekte olan ülkeler için
The most
en
important
önemli
issues for
hususlar
developing countries
finansman,
are financing,
teknoloji
technology
transferi
transfer,
ve
and
kapasite
capacity building.
geliştirmedir. Bakü'de
I
düzenlenecek
sincerely believe
COP
that the
29
COP29
iklim
climate summit
zirvesinin
in Baku
bu meselelerin
will
çözümüne
contribute to the
katkı
solution
yapacağına
of these
inanıyorum.
issues.
Daha sürdürülebilir ve temiz bir dünya vizyonuyla
At the summit,
eşim
we expect
Emine
to
Erdoğan
launch important
hanımefendinin
additional initiatives
himayesinde
and unveil
başlattığımız
our long-term
sıfır atık
low
hareketini
emission development
Birleşmiş Milletler
strategy
Genel Kurulu'nda
and the
105 ülkenin
zero waste
ortak
initiative
sunuculuğunda
that
oy
became a
birliğiyle
reality
kabul
under the
edilen
auspices
kararla
of my
küresel
spouse,
boyuta
Madam
taşıdı.
Emine Erdoğan. And with mutual agreements we have taken
Buradan
our
tüm ülkeleri,
domestic
uluslararası
affairs
teşkilatları
and
ve sivil
initiatives
toplum
to
kuruluşlarını
international agendas.
hareketimize
I would
ortak
like
olmaya
to
davet ediyorum.
ask everybody
İslam
to
ve
support our
yabancı
endeavors in
düşmanlığı
that
ile
regard.
ırkçılığın
We see Islamophobia,
zehirli bir sarmaşık
xenophobia,
gibi
and
dünyayı
racism
sarmakta olduğunu
creeping over the world
görüyoruz.
like a poison ivy.
Camilere ve mukaddes kitabımız Kur'an-ı Kerim'e yönelik saldırılara
We can see
şahit
that every
olmadığımız
week attacks
neredeyse
are taking place
tek bir
upon our
gün
mosques
yok.
and our holy book.
Avrupa'nın
Quran.
ortasında
In the middle
etnik
of Europe,
ve dini
people's
kimlikleri
homes are
nedeniyle
set on fire
insanların
and lives are
evleri
taken
ateşe
because of
veriliyor.
their ethnic and religious
Hayatlarına kastediliyor.
affiliation.
En temel hakları göz göre göre
Their
özellikle
lives are
gasp
taken
ediliyor.
away from them and their
Büyüyen bu
fundamental rights
tehlikeyi
are being
kimse daha fazla görmezden gelemez.
suspended.
15
And
Mart
nobody can ignore
2024
this growing
tarihinde
danger any
kabul
longer.
edilen karar
On
tasarısının
March 15,
öngördüğü şekilde
2024,
en
we
yakın
expect a
zamanda
special envoy
Birleşmiş
to combat
Milletler'de
Islamophobia to be
İslamofobi ile
appointed
mücadele
at the United
özel
Nations as soon
temsilcisi
as possible,
atanmasını
as
bekliyoruz.
envisaged in the draft
Kıymetli
resolution
dostlar,
adopted on March
geçen sene
15th.
bu kürsüde gündeme getirdiğim bir tehlikeye karşı bugün
Today,
bir
I
kez
would
daha
like to draw your attention once again to
dikkatlerinizi
the
çekmek
danger
istiyorum.
that I raised last year on
Toplumun
this
temel
podium.
direği olan
Attacks
aile
on
kurumuna
institution
yönelik
of
saldırılar
family, the pillar of
giderek
society, are
yoğunlaşıyor.
increasing.
2024 olimpiyat
The disgrace
oyunlarının
staged
açılışında
at the opening of the
sahnelenen
2024
rezalet,
Olympic Games
insanlık
has
olarak
revealed the extent
karşı
of
karşıya
threat
olduğumuz
we face as
tehdidin
humanity.
boyutlarını gözler önüne sermiştir. Masum çocukların
A sporting
her
event
yaştan
watched by
ve inançtan
innocent children
yüz
and
milyonlarca
hundreds of
insanın
millions of
izlediği
people of all
bir
ages
spor
and
etkinliği
beliefs has
hem de
been used
çok
as a tool
çirkin bir
for
şekilde
a sexist
cinsiyetsiz hale
propaganda.
getirilmiş,
It was
propagandasına
actually
alet edilmiştir. O kötü sahneler sadece Katolik alemini,
a parade
Hristiyan
of bad
dünyasını değil,
scenes. Those disturbing
Müslümanları
scenes of evil
ve
have wounded not only the
kutsala
Catholic
saygısı
world,
olan
the Christian world,
herkesi
but
derinden
everyone
yaralamıştır.
who respects the sacred
Cinsiyetsizleştirme
values.
meselesi
The
bir
issue of
tercihten ziyade
desexualization is no
artık
longer an
küresel
orientation,
bir
but a
dayatmaya,
global imposition.
tam anlamıyla kutsala
It literally became
ve
a war
fırsata
against the
karşı
sacred
bir savaşa
and
dönüşüyor.
human
Bu
nature.
yıkım projesi karşısında
We are facing a
ses çıkaran,
multidimensional,
en ufak bir
comprehensive,
tepki gösteren herkes susturulmakta, linç
and
kampanyalarının
ruthless project
hedefi
of
olmaktadır.
destruction.
Ne pahasına olursa
Who are
olsun
speaking out and who are reacting
Türkiye
to
bu
this
kuşatmayı
evil.
yarmakta ve
Anyone
yıpratmakta.
who raises
Bu
a voice
korku
for this
iklimine
annihilation
direnmekte
project is silenced
kararlıdır.
and targeted by
Bu
lynch
amaçla
campaigns. And
Birleşmiş
Turkey is
Milletler
determined to break the siege
ailenin
and resist the
dostları
climate of
grubuna
fear. To this
üye
end,
oldu.
we became a member of the United
İnşallah
Nations
diğer
Friends
üye
of the Family
ülkelerle
Group.
dayanışma içinde
İnşallah, God
aileyi,
willing, together with other
insanı,
member countries, we will not hesitate to
fıtratı
defend the
savunmaktan
family, the human
geri
being,
durmayacağız.
and the human nature.
bizimle aynı endişeleri paylaşan
I invite
ülkeleri
all the
bu
countries that
mücadeleye
share our sentiments
omuz
to
vermeye
shoulder this struggle.
davet ediyorum. Bu
With
düşüncelerle
these thoughts in mind,
79.
I wish
Genel
that the
Kurul'un
79th General
tüm
Assembly
insanlık
will
için
be auspicious
hayırlara
for
vesile
all
olmasını
humanity.
diliyorum. Hepinizi
I greet you
bir
all
kez daha
once again
sevgi
with love
ve
and
saygıyla
respect.
selamlıyorum. Kalın
May
sağlıcakla.
peace be with you and may you remain in health.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Turkey, The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty King Abdullah II Ibn al-Hussein, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I request protocol to escort His Majesty and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies. Over the past quarter century, I have stood at this podium amidst regional conflicts, global upheavals, and humanitarian crises that have profoundly tested our global community. It often feels that there was not a moment when our world was not in turmoil. And yet, I cannot recall a time of greater peril than this. Our United Nations is facing a crisis that strikes at its very legitimacy and threatens a collapse of global trust and moral authority. The UN is under attack, literally and figuratively. For nearly a year, the sky blue flag flying over UN shelters and schools in Gaza has been powerless to protect innocent civilians from Israeli military bombardment. UN aid trucks sit motionless just miles away from starving Palestinians. Humanitarian workers who proudly wear the emblem of this institution are disparaged and targeted. And the rulings of the UN's International Court of Justice are defied, its opinions disregarded. So it's no surprise that both inside and outside this hall, trust in UN's cornerstone principles and ideals is crumbling. The harsh reality many see is that some nations are above international law, that global justice does bend to the will of power, and that human rights are selective, a privilege to be granted or denied at will. We cannot stand for that. And we must recognize that undermining our international institutions and global frameworks is one of the gravest threats to our global security today. Ask yourselves, if we are not nations united in the conviction that all people are equal in rights, dignity, and worth, and that all countries are equal in the eyes of the law, what kind of world does that leave us with? Your Excellencies, the attacks of October 7th on Israeli civilians last year were condemned by countries all over the world, including Jordan. But the unprecedented scale of terror unleashed on Gaza since that day is beyond any justification. The Israeli government's assault has resulted in one of the fastest death rates in recent conflicts, one of the fastest rates of starvation caused by war, the largest cohort of child amputees, and unprecedented levels of destruction. This Israeli government has killed more children, more journalists, more aid workers, and more medical personnel than any other war in recent memory. And let us not forget the attacks on the West Bank. There, since October 7th, the Israeli government has killed more than 700 Palestinians. Among them, 160 children. Palestinians held in Israeli detention centers exceed 10,700, including 400 women and 730 children. 730 children. Over 4,000 Palestinians have been forced from their homes and lands. Armed settler violence has surged, and entire villages have been displaced. And in Jerusalem, a flagrant violations of the historical and legal status quo at Muslim and Christian holy sites continue unabated under the protection and encouragement of members of the Israeli government. To be clear, this is in the West Bank, not Gaza. Almost 42,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. So is it any wonder that many are questioning how can this war not be perceived as deliberately targeting the Palestinians? The level of civilian suffering cannot be written off as unavoidable collateral. I grew up a soldier in a region that is all too familiar with conflict. But there is nothing familiar about this war and the violence unleashed since October 7th. In the absence of global accountability, repeated horrors are normalized, threatening to create a future where anything is permitted, anywhere in the world. Is that what we want? Now is the time to ensure the protection of the Palestinian people. It is the moral duty of this international community to establish a protection mechanism for them across the occupied territories. This will guarantee the safety of Palestinians and Israelis from extremists who are taking our region to the brink of an all-out war. That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime. No country in the region benefits from escalation. We have seen that clearly in the dangerous developments in Lebanon over the past few days. This has to stop. For years, the Arab world has extended a hand to Israel through the Arab Peace Initiative, offering full recognition and normalization in exchange for peace. But consecutive Israeli governments, emboldened by years of impunity, have rejected peace and chosen confrontation instead. Impunity gathers force. Left unchecked, it gains momentum. Palestinians have borne more than 57 years of occupation and oppression. During this time, the Israeli government has been allowed to cross one red line after another. But now, Israel's decades-long impunity is becoming its own worst enemy, and the consequences are everywhere. The Israeli government has been accused of genocide at the ICJ. Expressions of outrage at its conduct are echoing around the world. Cities everywhere have seen mass protests, and calls for sanctions are growing louder. International frustration with Israel has long been mounting, but it has never been more exposed. For decades, Israel has projected itself as a thriving Western-style democracy in the Middle East. But the brutality of the war on Gaza has forced the world to look closer. Now many see Israel through the eyes of its victims. And the contradiction, the paradox, is too jarring. The modern advanced Israel admired from afar, and the Israel that Palestinians have experienced firsthand, simply cannot coexist. Israel will eventually be entirely one or the other. That is the choice its leaders and its people will have to make. To live by the democratic values of freedom, justice, and equality for all, or to risk further isolation and rejection. Over and over, we have watched Israel try to achieve security through military means. Each escalation is followed by a pause until the next deadlier one. And for years, the global community has taken the path of least resistance, accepting the status quo of the ongoing military occupation of Palestinians, all the while paying lip service to the two-state solution. But it has never been more evident that the current status quo is untenable. And as the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion underscored 2 months ago, it is unequivocally illegal. The court's opinion bears a moral imperative to us all. The obligation it carries is one that our nations cannot afford to ignore for the sake of our world, as well as the future for Palestinians and Israelis alike. Because both peoples deserve to live their lives in dignity, free of violence and fear. And the only way to achieve that is a just peace, one grounded in international law, justice, equal rights, and mutual recognition. That is something we, as nations and people everywhere, can and must unite around. Your Excellencies, the world is watching, and history will judge us by the courage we show. The future that will hold us accountable, so will the people of the here and now. They will judge whether we as the United Nations will surrender to inaction or will fight to uphold the principles that anchor this institution and our world. Right now they are asking whether we will stand by as parents watch their children waste away, as doctors watch their patients die for lack of basic medical supplies, and as more innocent lives are lost because the world failed to act. This war must end. Hostages and detainees must return home. But every day we wait is one day too long for far too many. So I call on all countries to join Jordan in enforcing an international Gaza humanitarian gateway, a massive relief effort to deliver food, clean water, medicine, and other vital supplies to those in desperate need. because humanitarian aid should never be a tool of war. Whatever our politics, one truth is undeniable. No people should have to endure such unprecedented suffering, abandoned and alone. We cannot surrender the future to those who thrive on division and conflict. I urge all nations of conscience to unite with Jordan in the critical weeks ahead on this mission. Almost a year into this war, our world has failed politically, but our humanity must not fail the people of Gaza any longer. Echoing the words of my father from 64 years ago at the 15th session of the General Assembly, I pray that this community of nations may have the courage to decide wisely and fearlessly, and will act with urgent resolve that this crisis and our conscience demand. My father was a man who fought for peace to the very end. And like him, I refuse to leave my children or your children a future we have given up on. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
La Asamblea escuchará ahora
The Assembly
un discurso
will now hear an address
del presidente de mi país,
by the President
la
of my
República
country,
de
the
Guatemala,
Republic of
el
Guatemala,
excelentísimo
His
señor
Excellency,
César
Mr. César
Bernardo
Bernardo
Arevalo
Arevalo de León.
Pido a
I
protocolo
request
que
protocol
acompañe a
to
su
escort His
excelencia,
Excellency
a quien tengo
and
el
invite
muy
him
especial honor de invitar a dirigirse
to
a la
address the
Asamblea.
Assembly, and this is a very special honor for me.
Excelentísima señora Carla Rodríguez, vicepresidente del 79º periodo de sesiones de la Asamblea General, excelentísimo señor Antonio Guterres, secretario general de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas, excelentísimos señores y señoras, jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, honorables delegados, señoras y señores.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Risi Wantinamit Pashil Kayala, Kuyarutzil Uwashri Uwashuleu. El pueblo de Guatemala saluda al mundo. Les saludo en el idioma del pueblo quiché, una de las comunidades ancestrales más numerosas e influyentes de Guatemala. Su fuerza y la de los diversos pueblos de Guatemala es el sustento de nuestro gobierno, es la fuerza de nuestro país, es la voz retumbante de quienes no han sido escuchados, de quienes han sido marginados, pero que tienen mucho que decir, mucho que aportar, que tienen un lugar en la construcción de nuestro futuro colectivo. Estoy aquí como resultado de dos expresiones claras de voluntad popular. La primera, una votación que rechazó tajantemente a los representantes de la historia autoritaria y el pasado corrupto de Guatemala y me otorgó el honor de la presidencia, de liderar el esfuerzo nacional para avanzar hacia un futuro de justicia, de igualdad y de progreso. La segunda, la defensa que la sociedad de Guatemala en sus diferentes expresiones reafirmó y defendió en las calles de la decisión que tomó en las urnas cuando una
decision that
minoría
they took
corrupta
at the polls
intentó imponer
when
su
a
permanencia
corrupt minority
y estafar
attempted to
la democracia.
impose their further rule and cheat
Nuestra
democracy.
democracia no estaría
Our
completa,
democracy
no podría
will not be
existir
complete, it could not
sin el
exist
impulso
without
decidido
the
y valiente
impetus
de los pueblos mayas de Guatemala, del pueblo mestizo, del pueblo garinagu del Caribe y del pueblo xinca. Es una democracia que viene de nuestros 4 puntos cardinales, de los 4 pueblos que juntos conformamos una nación. Y el rol de nuestro gobierno es darle sentido de unidad a esa diversidad y avanzar hacia un futuro próspero e incluyente. Quiero expresar la gratitud especial de Guatemala hacia los países, pueblos y gobiernos que estuvieron junto a nosotros, junto al pueblo de Guatemala, en esta gesta histórica del 2023 y al apoyo que nos continúan dando en nuestro esfuerzo por rescatar las instituciones democráticas. Y lo estamos haciendo mediante el diálogo, un diálogo que está enmarcado en un gran consenso nacional, algo que todas y todos los guatemaltecos compartimos, más allá de nuestras diferencias ideológicas, de nuestra diversidad cultural, de nuestras distintas formas de ver el mundo, y que estoy seguro que en este foro todos se identifican con ese consenso. No podemos seguir tolerando la corrupción. La corrupción, cuando unos pocos abusan de lo que es de todos para enriquecerse, es como un ancla que nos detiene en el pasado, que nos impide crecer, prosperar y construir una sociedad basada en el bien común. En el caso de Guatemala, la corrupción hunde sus raíces en el pasado autoritario de represión, de violencia política, de exclusión social. Pero nos estamos liberando de las cadenas del pasado oscuro y está surgiendo una nación joven, creativa, vital, alegre e inquieta. Una juventud que no sabe callar ante las injusticias y ante la corrupción. Una comunidad diversa que está construyendo el futuro. Un futuro donde quepan todas y todos, donde las oportunidades se multipliquen, donde la colaboración y la solidaridad potencien el ingenio, la creatividad y el esfuerzo individual. Donde los padres duerman tranquilos, sabiendo que la salud y las oportunidades educativas de sus hijos estarán garantizadas, donde el trabajo será recompensado justamente y donde la prosperidad no exigirá actos inmorales, actos de corrupción, donde la tierra, nuestra tierra, será tratada con gratitud y respeto y nos dará a cambio espacios limpios para trabajar, para vivir, para recrearnos, to recreate ourselves, to grow. Ese es el futuro que estamos construyendo para Guatemala. Y este futuro no surge en el vacío. Lo hemos imaginado viendo hacia adentro, hacia nuestros principios, nuestros propios valores, hacia nuestra propia cosmovisión. Nuestro gobierno es de los pueblos diversos de Guatemala y son los valores y la visión de estos 4 pueblos los instrumentos que tenemos para navegar el mar de la transformación. De la misma manera, este foro tan importante, tan necesario para la convivencia global y para el progreso de todas las naciones, debe ver hacia adentro, debe retomar sus valores fundamentales y utilizarlos para navegar la compleja realidad que enfrentamos hoy como planeta. Es tiempo de rescatar el multilateralismo, de revitalizar el diálogo para la paz y de tomar acciones concretas para la solución de los problemas urgentes que nos aquejan. Empecemos por el origen, la guerra, ese horror que motivó la apertura de este foro mundial, ha capturado de nuevo nuestra atención, está siendo una realidad constante, pero ahora en los últimos 2 años ha tomado una intensidad inesperada. No debemos tolerarla. No podemos tolerar la guerra. No debemos ignorar los conflictos internacionales que afectan la paz y la seguridad de todos. No debemos abandonar la esperanza de un mundo sin guerra, de un futuro en paz. Guatemala reitera su solidaridad con las naciones que están sufriendo conflictos armados y guerras impuestas. Hacemos un llamado a los miembros de esta asamblea a que redoblemos los esfuerzos regionales e internacionales para que encontremos soluciones pacíficas a las controversias, basadas en el respeto al derecho internacional y en el derecho internacional humanitario y al principio fundamental de la dignidad humana. No podemos aceptar ninguna violación a la Carta de las Naciones Unidas ni a las resoluciones del Consejo de Seguridad por parte de ningún Estado miembro de esta organización, ni en Ucrania, ni en Gaza, ni en Sudán, ni en ninguna otra parte del mundo. Señoras y señores, el rescate del multilateralismo como principio fundamental para el sistema internacional es una necesidad urgente y para cada una de las naciones que conformamos este foro, un compromiso ineludible si queremos realmente y sinceramente un futuro de paz y progreso. Solo con reformas de fondo podremos retomar el camino propuesto desde su fundación en 1945. En un mundo multipolar necesitamos nuevos enfoques que se adapten a las necesidades emergentes de las naciones. Apoyamos la reforma del Consejo de Seguridad que retome un enfoque colectivo, pacifista y democrático en su acción. No es aceptable que se dejen de adoptar decisiones a favor de la paz por causa de un derecho que ejercen unos pocos. Me refiero al derecho de veto y con ello evitar que se tomen decisiones contundentes en contra de aquellos estados que violen repetidamente la Carta de esta organización. Recordamos a los miembros del Consejo de Seguridad su responsabilidad primordial de mantener la paz internacional y la seguridad internacional, y que en el desempeño de sus funciones deben proceder de acuerdo con los propósitos y principios de las Naciones Unidas. Señora Vicepresidente, Guatemala contribuye como parte de su compromiso pacifista con 213 oficiales, observadores militares y oficiales de Estado Mayor en 7 de las misiones de mantenimiento de la paz de la Organización de Naciones Unidas. Una contribución que nos llena de orgullo. Nuestro profesionalismo y experiencia en este campo nos ha llevado a ser reconocidos internacionalmente como uno de los países que más contribuye a la paz en América Latina y el Caribe. Comparto con esta Asamblea General que estamos finalizando las gestiones administrativas para concretar nuestra participación y despliegue de un contingente de policía militar en la misión multinacional de apoyo a la seguridad en Haití, en virtud de la resolución 2699-2023 del Consejo de Seguridad de la Organización. Guatemala expresa su disposición de apoyar todo esfuerzo encaminado hacia el restablecimiento de la seguridad y la estabilidad en Haití, la primera nación contemporánea independiente de este hemisferio y con quien nos unen a todos los países de las Américas lazos históricos de responsabilidad. Hemos sabido desde hace mucho tiempo que un atentado contra la dignidad humana en cualquier parte del mundo es un atentado contra toda la humanidad. Por eso, la paz es un imperativo de orden global. Todos podemos contribuir. Todos debemos hacer la parte que nos corresponde. Esta idea es está en el corazón y la existencia de esta organización. En el mismo sentido, esta organización tiene la obligación de mantener e incrementar su cooperación para asegurar la protección de los migrantes, los desplazados, las personas que por razones políticas, sociales, económicas o ambientales han llevado su vida a otros territorios. Nuestro gobierno se ha comprometido a transformar la relación entre el Estado de Guatemala y las y los guatemaltecos que se encuentran residiendo fuera de nuestro territorio, pero que continúan siendo parte integral de nuestra nación y cuyo trabajo es parte fundamental de nuestra economía. Lo estamos haciendo a través de una estrategia que permite una participación efectiva de la diáspora en el desarrollo nacional, convirtiéndolos en socios de proyectos para mejorar las condiciones de vida de las familias que se han quedado en Guatemala. En el futuro que estamos construyendo, la migración es un derecho, una opción, no una sentencia derivada de la falta de oportunidades, la violencia o el hambre. En la última década, Guatemala ha pasado de ser un país de origen de personas migrantes a ser cada vez más un territorio de tránsito y retorno, así como en menor medida también un lugar de destino. Nuestro compromiso es dar un trato digno a todas las personas que lleguen a nuestro territorio, consistente con el trato que exigimos para las y los guatemaltecos en el exterior. Nuestro Estado está haciendo cambios sustanciales en la atención y protección que otorga a las personas migrantes. Hemos identificado las áreas de mejora y oportunidad para fortalecer el manejo de los flujos de la migración internacional de una manera segura, ordenada y regular. Es mi convicción personal, la de mi gobierno y la de la amplia mayoría de guatemaltecos y guatemaltecas, que todos los inmigrantes merecen la oportunidad de una vida digna y el respeto de sus derechos fundamentales, independientemente de las causas que les llevan a migrar. Por ello creemos firmemente en la labor que se realiza a través del sistema de las Naciones Unidas. Guatemala promueve el cumplimiento de los 23 objetivos establecidos en el Pacto Mundial para la Migración Segura, Ordenada y Regular, fomentando la cooperación internacional en el ámbito migratorio. Con esa misma convicción, hemos acogido a 135 hermanos nicaragüenses que fueron liberados de la prisión arbitraria de su gobierno. Nuestro compromiso es que Guatemala sea siempre un espacio de dignidad y libertad para quienes lleguen a nuestro territorio, especialmente para los centroamericanos que son, de acuerdo con nuestra Constitución, nuestra historia y el sentimiento general de nuestro pueblo, connacionales y hermanos. Guatemala reafirma su compromiso con los principios fundamentales de la democracia, tal como ha quedado recogido en la Carta Democrática Interamericana y como un principio fundamental de la organización política de nuestros pueblos. Rechazamos en el hemisferio y en todo el mundo cualquier intento por reprimir las aspiraciones de libertad y justicia que expresan los pueblos del mundo mediante procesos libres y democráticos, como está sucediendo en estos momentos en Venezuela y en Nicaragua. Los principios de la democracia son fundamentales para preservar la libertad, la dignidad y la prosperidad incluyente y equitativa de la humanidad. Señora Vicepresidente, ante esta Asamblea General quiero reafirmar el compromiso de Guatemala para resolver de manera permanente y definitiva ante la Corte Internacional de Justicia el diferendo territorial, insular y marítimo con nuestro vecino país, hermano, Belice. Al optar por el diálogo y los mecanismos jurídicos internacionales,
Hemos demostrado que la vía pacífica y el respeto a las instituciones multilaterales son el camino más efectivo para resolver disputas entre naciones. Confiamos en que este proceso permitirá alcanzar una solución justa y definitiva, respetuosa de los derechos y la dignidad de ambos países. Este acto es una muestra de fe, de nuestra fe en el derecho internacional y nuestro compromiso con la paz duradera, no solo para Guatemala y Belice, sino como ejemplo para la región y el mundo. Señora Vicepresidente, la urgencia de los desafíos que enfrentamos nos obliga a tomar acciones concretas y no simplemente limitarnos a la retórica. Ya se ha dicho a menudo que es momento de pasar de las palabras a la acción. Los conflictos y la migración en Centroamérica son alimentados por lo que consideramos el más urgente desafío global: la crisis climática, una crisis que pone en riesgo a nuestros sistemas, a nuestra economía, a nuestra alimentación, a nuestra supervivencia misma. Estamos en un momento crítico para salvaguardar la generación presente y a las futuras. El cambio climático es una realidad devastadora que afecta a la humanidad, que nos afecta hoy, pero que tendrá consecuencias catastróficas para el futuro. Guatemala, a pesar de ser un país mega diverso, es altamente vulnerable a los eventos climatológicos extremos que causan desastres naturales, inundaciones, deslizamientos, incendios y el incremento de temperaturas de las cuales hemos sido todos testigos este año. Nuestra contribución a la emisión de gases de efecto invernadero es mínima, y sin embargo sufrimos como pocos territorios el embate de estos eventos climáticos extremos. Estamos adaptándonos a esta realidad y reduciendo la vulnerabilidad de nuestro territorio. En el año 2025 presentaremos la actualización de nuestra contribución nacionalmente determinada en cumplimiento a los compromisos establecidos en el Acuerdo de París. Pero debemos recordar en este foro que la responsabilidad para atender esta crisis es compartida. Nos corresponde actuar para resolverla a quienes sufrimos los embates de esta crisis, pero también a quienes la han provocado. Llamamos urgentemente a las grandes potencias a asumir el liderazgo que les corresponde, así como la responsabilidad moral y financiera con las naciones que hemos sufrido sus peores efectos. El momento para actuar es ahora, y es esencial que la próxima COP29 a celebrarse en Azerbaiyán sea un éxito. El compromiso de Guatemala para lograr ese objetivo es total. Estimados amigos, señora Vicepresidente, Guatemala está cambiando, y ese cambio implica una transformación de nuestra relación con el mundo. Estamos haciendo lo que nos corresponde para contribuir a los fines de esta organización, y esta contribución nace de un compromiso normativo con los valores de paz y solidaridad global, pero también viene de un mandato democrático que nos ha sido impuesto. Nuestro pueblo tiene la convicción de que la democracia es una condición necesaria para el progreso y el bienestar. Guatemala tiene un pasado autoritario aún muy reciente, un pasado trágico que muchos de ustedes conocen. Sin embargo, expresando la vocación de libertad de nuestro pueblo y con un acompañamiento importante de la comunidad internacional, hemos dado un giro hacia la promoción y defensa de los derechos humanos, enfrentando con seriedad nuestros problemas, rezagos y deudas históricas y asumiendo con valentía la responsabilidad de resolver nuestros problemas actuales. La visita
reciente del Alto Comisionado Volker Türk y la renovación inmediata de la presencia en Guatemala de su oficina son un testimonio de este compromiso. Guatemala ha renovado su compromiso con el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, con la reciente adopción del Pacto del Futuro en el marco de la cumbre del futuro. Tenemos la convicción de que el crecimiento económico por sí solo no produce el desarrollo. La cooperación, la protección del medio ambiente, la inclusión social, el respeto y la promoción de la dignidad humana y la seguridad son condiciones indispensables del desarrollo. Guatemala está cambiando. Estamos caminando hacia un futuro más equitativo, donde el desarrollo y el progreso llegarán a cada rincón del país, especialmente a las poblaciones más abandonadas, y donde cada persona, sin importar su origen, tenga la posibilidad de construir una vida digna y plena. Esta es una aspiración natural de todos los pueblos. Haremos nuestra parte para conseguirla en Guatemala y colaboraremos para lograrla donde sea requerido. Pero estamos haciéndolo porque sabemos que el mundo está cambiando. De nuestro esfuerzo como naciones unidas en este foro depende que este cambio ineludible y en ciernes sea para el bienestar de nuestros pueblos y nuestras naciones. Esta era la visión de quienes fundaron esta organización hace 79 años. Esta es la visión que debe orientar nuestros esfuerzos hoy como humanidad. Y termino citando al libro sagrado del pueblo maya, el Popol Vuh, que refleja este sentimiento, diciendo que todos se levanten y que nadie se quede atrás. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
En nombre de la Asamblea,
on behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency President of the Republic of Guatemala. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Viola Amherd, President of the Swiss Confederation. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Madame la Vice-Présidente, Madame la Vice-Secrétaire Générale, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le matin du 3 mars 2002, j'ai déposé dans l'urne un bulletin de vote sur lequel j'avais inscrit
I placed a ballot paper in the ballot box on which I had written a decisive yes. From early morning, figures and projections had already been displayed on TV screens, and yet it wasn't until the evening that the verdict was rendered. After a long and difficult struggle and a controversial election campaign, Switzerland was going to join the United Nations. In fact, ultimately, it was just a few hundred votes in the Valais canton, my region of origin, that were the decisive ones. The Swiss people thus expressed the resolve of our country to shoulder its responsibilities and to participate in international politics in a spirit of solidarity. That was more than 2 decades ago. Today, I'm speaking to you just a few days away from the Swiss presidency of the Security Council. The world has changed, but not our principles. Like numerous other countries, Switzerland is increasingly concerned by worsening tensions throughout the world and the emergence of new conflicts. Unfortunately, we increasingly see gross violations of human rights and a complete disdain for internationally recognized borders. Might risks trumping the rule of law, and the use of force has considerably increased. It is only by standing together that we can confront this trend, that the great writer Charles Ferdinand Ramuz described so well a century ago. I quote, "Misfortune never comes alone. They get married and have children." Great challenges face us.
Guerre,
Wars,
catastrophes, dommages
disasters,
que nous infligeons à notre propre planète, ainsi que les risques, opportunités associés aux progrès technologiques. L'ONU, en tant que seule organisation universelle, est d'une importance centrale pour traiter ces questions.
in tackling these issues.
Prendre la décision de mieux travailler ensemble, indépendamment du régime politique, des structures économiques et des différences culturelles, est un commencement. Le monde ne doit pas se diviser en blocs. Cela implique que nous soyons prêts à négocier avec toutes les grandes régions du monde sur des principes qui soient dans l'intérêt de tous et respectés par tous. Le droit international doit toujours en constituer la base. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la recherche de la paix prime sur tout et la Suisse s'y engage.
And Switzerland is committed to this, standing in solidarity, faithful to its tradition of good offices, and because giving up and inaction should never be an option. Switzerland, this summer, brought together about 100 countries and international organizations during the high-level Conference for Peace in Ukraine. Our aim was to give an initial push for a comprehensive, fair and lasting peace in Ukraine based on international law and the UN Charter. We would like to reiterate our invitation to the international community to spare no effort to support concrete measures and the joint communique.
Le droit international est le fondement sur lequel reposent nos efforts communs pour la paix, la sécurité et la prospérité dans le monde. Les conventions de Genève, dont nous commémorons le 75e anniversaire cette année, régissent les bases juridiques de la guerre et par conséquent la protection des civils. Cependant, les chiffres récents de l'ONU dresse un tableau désastreux de la communauté internationale. Non seulement la population et les infrastructures civiles ne sont pas suffisamment protégées, mais elles font l'objet d'attaques répétées. Nous observons des violations du droit international humanitaire du Myanmar à l'Ukraine, du Proche-Orient au Soudan. Mon pays s'est fortement engagé pour que le Conseil de sécurité adopte des résolutions de cessez-le-feu à Gaza et au Soudan notamment. Il est urgent que ces résolutions soient maintenant mises en œuvre et respectées. De même, nous appelons avec insistance à un retour immédiat à la cessation totale des hostilités de part et d'autre de la ligne bleue. Le lourd tribut payé par les populations civiles dans ces crises et conflits actuels conforte la Suisse dans sa volonté de continuer à considérer le droit international humanitaire comme une priorité absolue. Son respect est au cœur de notre engagement au sein du Conseil de sécurité. La protection de la population civile ne va pas de soi et n'est en aucun cas garantie. Nous devons lui accorder une plus grande importance dans les situations de conflit. La meilleure condition pour la protection de la population civile reste et demeure la paix. C'est dans cet esprit que mon pays s'investit dans la promotion de la paix civile et militaire. Bien que certaines missions de paix n'aient pas atteint tous les objectifs fixés, elles contribuent jour après jour à la sécurité des personnes, à la stabilité et à la paix.
and to stability and
Nous
to
devons
peace.
surmonter les
We need
désaccords
to
lorsqu'il
overcome
s'agit de
disagreements
décider de nouvelles
when
missions.
we are deciding
La
upon
paix
new
est trop
missions.
précieuse pour devenir un
Peace is
terrain de
too
jeu
precious to
où
become a
s'expriment des
playground
intérêts
where
particuliers.
individual interests
Aux
play
côtés
out.
de nombreux partenaires internationaux, la
Standing
Suisse apporte
alongside
sa
numerous
contribution
international
à la promotion de la paix
Switzerland is
et
making its
renforce son
contribution to
engagement
promoting
là où
peace
cela est possible.
and strengthening its
Outre les
commitment
questions liées
where
au conflit
possible.
et à la paix,
Over and
de
beyond
nombreux
matters
autres
pertaining to
défis nous
peace and
préoccupent.
conflict,
Nous devons les
numerous
relever
other
de
challenges
toute
are of
urgence.
concern.
Depuis quelques
We
années, il
urgently
apparaît
need
toujours
to
plus évident
address
que la population
these. For
civile
several years
doit
now, it
être
has become
protégée non
increasingly
seulement
clear
lors de
that
conflits
civilians
armés,
must be
mais
protected
aussi
not
face
only
aux
during armed
catastrophes
conflicts,
naturelles.
but also during
Le
natural
changement
disasters.
climatique et la
Climate
perte
change
de
and
biodiversité
biodiversity
ont des
loss
conséquences existentielles
have an
pour un nombre
existential
croissant de
impact on a
personnes.
growing number of people.
Il est crucial
It
que
is
nous
crucial
maintenons également
that we
notre
also
engagement dans
maintain
ces
our
domaines,
commitment in these
que nous les
areas
renforcions
and
et
we
prenions des
bolster
mesures
them
courageuses
and
pour
take
l'avenir. De
brave,
nombreux accords
courageous
internationaux
measures
sur
for the
l'environnement
future.
ou sur le changement climatique
Numerous
ne sont pas
international
appliqués
agreements
ou
on
le
the
sont de
environment
manière
or on climate
insuffisante.
change have not
Cela
been
conduit
implemented or
à
have
une
been done so
destruction
insufficiently.
massive de
This
notre
has led to
environnement.
a massive
Je
destruction
suis également
of our
préoccupée par
environment.
l'augmentation
I'm
de la
also concerned
désinformation
by the
qui sape
uptick
la
in
liberté d'opinion
disinformation.
basée sur
This
des faits.
undermines freedom
Les
of
acteurs
opinion
privés
based on facts.
étatiques
Private and
diffusent des
state
fausses informations dans leur
actors are
propre
spreading
pays et dans
false
d'autres
information in
États
their own
afin d'attiser
countries
la
and in other
polarisation,
countries
semer la
in order
discorde
to
et
deepen
déstabiliser
polarization,
des
sow
États.
discord and destabilize states.
La Suisse s'engage résolument
Switzerland
en
is
faveur de la
firmly
liberté
committed to
d'expression
freedom of
et de la
expression
liberté des
and
médias.
to freedom of the
La
media.
désinformation est un
Disinformation
poison.
is a poison.
Nous voulons
We
y faire face
want
en
to
distinguant
address
mieux
this
ce qui
by
relève
better
de la liberté
distinguishing
d'expression
between
et
what
ce qui
comes
relève de la
under the rubric of
manipulation des
freedom of
faits,
expression
en
and
démasquant
what is the
les
manipulation of
influences
facts,
illégitimes, en
by
favorisant
debunking
des débats
illegitimate
ouverts
influence,
et
by
équitables
fostering
et en
open
informant de
and
manière transparente et objective
fair
en tant
debate
que
and by
gouvernement et
informing
organisations
people
internationales.
transparently and objectively, both as
Excellences,
governments
mesdames et messieurs,
and as international
la
organizations,
Suisse
we can achieve this
s'engage
excellencies.
résolument en faveur
Ladies and
d'un
gentlemen,
multilatéralisme
Switzerland is
fort
firmly
et
committed
efficace.
to strong and
J'ai
effective
conscience de la
multilateralism.
nécessité d'un
I'm aware of the
engagement
need
conjoint de tous
for
les
combined
États afin de
commitment
trouver
from all
ensemble
states
des
in order
solutions.
to find solutions together.
Mon pays est marqué par
My
des
country
débats
stands
démocratiques
out
réguliers
for its
à tous
regular
les niveaux de
democratic
l'État, au
debates
sein
at
des
all
communes,
levels
des
of our
régions
country,
et de la
within the
Confédération.
municipalities, our
Il
regions,
est
and at
urgent
the
de
Confederation
rétablir de
level.
tels débats
There is an
constructifs,
urgent need
pacifiques
to restore
entre
such
États
a
afin de relever
constructive
des
and peaceful
défis
debate between
existentiels.
states in order to tackle
Avant-hier,
existential
nous avons
challenges.
adopté
The day before
ensemble le
yesterday,
pacte pour l'avenir.
together, we
Le
adopted the
pacte est un
Pact for the
engagement
Future.
fort en
The
faveur
Pact
du
is a strong
multilatéralisme.
commitment to
L'une de
multilateralism.
ses dimensions clés
One
est
of the
l'agenda
key
2030
dimensions of this
pour le
is the
développement durable.
2030 Agenda for
Il constitue
Sustainable
notre feuille de
Development.
route que nous
This
devons
is
mettre en
our
œuvre
roadmap,
ensemble
which we need to
et le plus
implement together
rapidement
as
possible.
quickly as possible.
Il faut que l'idée naisse de la
The
vision
idea
comme
must be
l'étincelle
born
du
of the
caillou.
vision,
Disait
like the
également
spark
Ramu.
from the
Cette
stone.
situation reste
Ramu also
d'actualité.
said this, and this
Ayons
quote still
du
is
courage
relevant
et
today.
gardons
Let us
confiance.
be courageous
Nous
and
avons
let us
besoin d'un
remain
cadre
confident.
dans lequel
We
nous
need a
pouvons
framework
travailler
in which we
ensemble,
can work
en
together
partenariat,
in
pour trouver
partnership
des
to
solutions.
find solutions.
C'est justement
It
ce
is
cadre
the
que
United
nous offrent les
Nations
Nations Unies.
which provides
À nous
us with
de les
precisely
rendre,
this
de
framework.
rendre cette
It is
institution
up
plus
to
forte.
us to make
Je vous
this
remercie.
institution stronger. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée, je
On
remercie
behalf of the
la
Assembly, I wish to
présidente
thank
de
the
la
President
Confédération
of
suisse.
the Swiss Confederation.
La Asamblea
The Assembly will
escuchará
hear an
ahora
address
un discurso del
by
excelentísimo
His
señor
Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego,
Presidente
President
de la
of the
República de
Republic
Colombia.
of Colombia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mi hija, Antonella Petro,
My daughter, Antonella Penetro, has just sent me a paragraph, and she wanted me to begin that speech, my speech, with that paragraph. So with your indulgence, I will read it.
Es el párrafo de una niña de 15,
written by a
16
child
años y
of
dice
15,
así:
16 years old, and it reads as
Hoy
follows.
estoy orgulloso
Today I
de
am
presentarme
proud
ante
to
ustedes como el
appear before
presidente del
you
corazón de
as
la
the
tierra.
president of the heart of the earth.
Así es como nuestros
That is
indígenas
how
de
our
la Sierra
indigenous
Nevada
people on the Sierra Nevada
denominaron a mi hermoso país.
defined my beautiful country.
Geográficamente hablando, tiene
Geographically
sentido
speaking,
que
what they
nosotros
said is
seamos
logical, and
el
it's
corazón del
logical that
mundo.
we call ourselves the
Sin
heart
embargo,
of the world.
si
However,
somos el
if
corazón,
we are the heart,
tenemos que dar el ejemplo de
we have
unidad,
to
de
set
paz
an example
total
of unity,
y de
total
preservación de la
peace, and
naturaleza.
preservation,
Si
conservation
el corazón
of
funciona,
nature. If
es un gran avance.
the heart works
Sin
and
embargo,
beats, that's a great
todas
step
las otras
forward.
partes del
However,
cuerpo
all
son
other parts
importantes.
of the human
Si una
body
falla,
are important.
el resto
If
también lo
one
hará.
fails, the rest will follow.
Por eso es que desde el
As
corazón de
such,
la tierra
from the heart of the
invitamos a
earth,
todos los países
we now invite
a hacer
all
un acto de
countries
conciencia,
to have their
dejar a
conscience
un lado la
peaked,
codicia
to
que
stand
está
up and
matando al ser
leave
humano
aside the greed that is
y a la madre
killing
tierra
human beings and
y dar
Mother
un paso
Earth.
hacia
We
la
invite
paz
you all
total.
to take a step towards
Hasta ahí
total
mi hija
peace. My daughter
cumplió sus órdenes.
is in those
Y sigo.
paragraphs. Those are her orders.
Señoras y
Please take
señores
heed.
presidentes del mundo,
Ladies and gentlemen, presidents of the
en
world,
este recinto la
in this
capacidad de
very
comunicación de
house,
un presidente
the ability of a president
depende
to
de la
communicate
cantidad de
depends
dólares que
on
tenga en su
how
presupuesto,
many dollars he has in his budget.
en la cantidad que tenga de aviones de guerra
It depends on how
y en
many
el
warplanes
fondo
he
en la
has.
capacidad
And
que tenga
ultimately, it
su
depends
país
on the clout that his
destrucción
country
sobre la
has and its
humanidad.
ability to destroy
El poder de un
humankind.
país en el
The
mundo
power of a
ya no
country
se
in the
ejerce
world
por
is
el tipo
no
de sistema
longer
económico o político
exercised
o de ideas que
by the
irradie,
type of economic
sino
or
por el
political
poder de
system it has or its
destruir la
ideology,
vida de
but
la humanidad.
power is wielded according to how
Los que
much
no tenemos
capacity
ese
one
poder
has to
de
destroy
destrucción, al
humankind.
contrario,
There is this power
los
of
que tenemos
destruction,
el poder de sostener la vida en
but
el
who are
planeta,
important to those who really have
hablamos
the
sin
power
mucha
to
atención
sustain
prestada
life.
y
We
muchas
speak,
veces
but we're
quizás
often not listened
solo
to.
para nuestros propios
And
pueblos.
sometimes perhaps the only people
Por eso
listening
no
to those
nos
of us that
escuchan
want to sustain
cuando
life are
votamos
our own
que
peoples.
se
That's
detenga
why
el genocidio en Gaza.
that we're not listened to when
Aunque
we
seamos la
speak
mayoría
out
de
for
los
the
presidentes
genocide
del
in,
mundo
in Gaza
y
to be detained,
representantes
even though
de
we
la
do
mayor
speak
parte
for the
de la
majority of the
humanidad,
world and we represent vast
no nos
swathes of
escucha
humankind.
una
However,
minoría de
nevertheless, we're not
presidentes
listened to. A
que
small
pueden
minority of
detener el
presidents that
bombardeo.
are able to
Es
stop
decir,
the
no nos
bloodshed
escuchan
and
los presidentes
but they're
de los
not listened
países que
to.
pueden destruir la humanidad.
And we're not
Si
listened
pedimos
to
que
by
se
the
cambie la
presidents that
deuda
can
por acción
destroy
climática,
humankind. We're
no nos
asked to
escuchan las
we
minorías
ask
poderosas.
them to swap debt for
Si pedimos
climate
que
change
dejen las
spending, but we're
guerras
not
para
listened to. If we
concentrarnos
ask for war
en
to
la
stop so that we
transformación
can
rápida de la
concentrate
economía
on the
del mundo
expeditious
para
transformation
poder
of the
salvar
global
la vida
economy
y
so
la
that we
especie
can
humana,
save the very human
tampoco nos
species,
escuchan.
we're not listened to either
Es el
then.
poder de destrucción de
The
la
power
vida
to
lo
destroy
que da
life
volumen a la
is
voz en el
the
recinto de las
power
Naciones
that allows
Unidas y
voices to
congrega a la
reverberate
mayoría de sus
throughout the United
representantes y
Nations
delegados.
House, and it's that destructive power that gives
No se
convening
escucha
power
la
to
voz de las
representatives.
naciones
The voice
y pedimos unir
of
el
nations is
esfuerzo
not
humano en pos de
heard
la
when we
existencia.
ask
Aquí hablamos,
humankind
pero
to
no
unite
se
to
nos
preserve
escucha.
existence. We speak
Sin
here,
embargo,
but we're not listened to.
quizá ya no hablamos
However,
para que nos escuchen
perhaps we're not really
y
speaking any
dialoguemos con
longer
los
to be listened
presidentes del
to.
poder mundial,
We
sino
need
para que
to
escuchen los
speak
pueblos del mundo.
so that the peoples
Hoy las
of the
cosas
world
están
are listening.
peores que hace
That's
un
now
año.
what we're interested in.
Se han quemado 11
In the last
millones de
year,
hectáreas en la
11
selva
million
amazónica
hectares
en
of the
tan solo
Amazon
un
jungle have
mes
been built,
por el
burned
calentamiento
in
global
only
y la
actually
crisis
1 month as a
climática.
result of global
Los
warming and
científicos
climate
dijeron
change. Scientists
que si se
said
quemaba la
that
selva
if we
del
were to
Amazonas,
burn the
llegábamos
Amazon
al punto de
rainforest,
no
we
retorno
would reach a
climático,
point of no return
donde
in
las
climate
decisiones
terms,
humanas
where
para
human
detener el
decisions
colapso
to
ya
halt
serán
the collapse of the
inocuas.
climate would now
Pues bien,
have no effect
la selva
whatsoever.
amazónica
Well,
se está
the
quemando.
Amazon rainforest is burning. Bells are already tolling for the whole planet. Bells are tolling for you, for us, for humankind and life. That was said by Ernest Hemingway. The bell tolls for thee. Bells are not only tolling for you, but for all of life. The end has begun. A year ago, I called for a conference for peace on Palestine at this very rostrum. But the first bomb yet had not been dropped. Now 20,000 boys and girls have been killed under these bombs. And the presidents of the countries of human destruction are laughing in these very corridors with the help of mass media that today are the owners of major capitals. They are reordering a world, and they're creating a world without democracy and without freedom. The democratic project of humankind is dying along with life, while at the same time racists, supremacists, those who stupidly believe that the Aryan race is the superior race are getting ready to dominate the world, brandishing the threat of bombs and terror over human beings. The control of humankind on the very foundations of barbarism is being built. And that is being played out in Gaza, Lebanon. When Gaza dies, humanity will die, the whole of humanity. The people of God was not the people of Israel. It is not the people of the USA. Rather, the people of God is humankind as one. The children of Gaza, they were humankind, the chosen people of God. They are killing God's chosen people, the children of our very humankind. There is one reason for this contemporary Armageddon.
En la sinrazón de los gobiernos que aplauden el genocidio y que no actúan pronto para cambiar las economías hacia la descarbonización, hay una lógica. La lógica no está en el mundo político, ni en este atril donde hablan todos los presidentes. La lógica está afuera y se llama desigualdad social. Oxfam dice que el 1% más rico de la humanidad tiene más riqueza que el 95% de toda la humanidad junta. Es en esta desigualdad alcanzada, la mayor de nuestra historia como especie, donde se encuentra la lógica de la destrucción masiva desatada en la crisis climática y la lógica de las bombas que suelta un criminal como Netanyahu sobre Gaza.
Netanyahu as a criminal is letting those bombs raise down on Gaza. Netanyahu is a hero for the richest 1% of humankind because he's able to demonstrate that people can destroy themselves with bombs. If wealth is measured in CO2 issued and not in dollars, we have the answer. The richest 1% of humankind is responsible for the climate change, which is gaining ground and is getting ready to destroy the world with oil and carbon, because that is how the world grows rich. The politicians, including the presidents of the most powerful countries of Earth, quite simply obey them.
Pagan las campañas.
They pay their campaigns.
Ellos son los dueños de los medios de comunicación. Ellos son los que ocultan la verdad de la ciencia, como en la película No mires arriba. Ellos son los que dicen qué se piensa, qué se dice,
decide what is thought, what is said, what should be forbidden and what should be silenced. In their power to prohibit and to ban, they scream, long live liberty! But what they're talking about is nothing more than the freedom of the global 1%. They are obsessed with the free market, and that obsession brings us to the destruction of life and our atmosphere. The free market wasn't freedom, as they claimed it would be. Rather, what it meant was the maximization of debt. The richest 1% of humankind is the powerful global oligarchy. They are the people who allow us to drop bombs on women, elderly people, and the children of Gaza, Lebanon, or Sudan. They impose economic blockades on rebel countries that don't yield to their domination, Cuba, Venezuela, because they need to demonstrate their destructive capacity to the remaining 99% of humankind, so that they let them continue to wield power, continue to grow their wealth, and continue to tighten their control. This oligarchy is bringing humankind to the very brink of its own destruction. Politics just nods its head at them.
Y del poder de los pueblos, la idea de la democracia. La pregunta que hay que hacer desde esta tribuna es si los pueblos lo permitirán. Ya no hay más tiempo. Los gobiernos son incapaces de detener la extinción de la vida. Hoy hay que escoger si es la vida o es la codicia, si es la humanidad o es el capital. No puedo más que decirle a los pueblos del mundo desde la voz débil de un país sin armas de destrucción masiva, sin dólares, pero hermoso por su diversidad natural y cultural, el país de la belleza y la mariposa de todos los colores, que ya no es la hora de los gobiernos, sino la hora de los pueblos. El tiempo ya se acabó. O levantamos la bandera de la vida, o nuestros pueblos se llenarán de cementerios, como nos lo mostró la epidemia. Es la hora de los pueblos y hay que actuar localmente y concertar mundialmente. El capital fósil puede seguir. El capital fósil no puede seguir. Los pueblos deben detenerlo. El veneno arrojado en la atmósfera es fatal y las chimeneas que lo emiten deben detenerse. Cada rincón del mundo puede ser una batalla contra esas chimeneas. Hace un siglo se levantaba una bandera roja en manos de las multitudes obreras, hablando de una revolución contra el capital. Ese mundo se acabó. Perdido en el gigantismo de los estados y la ausencia de la libertad, la bandera roja no encontró su lugar en la historia de la humanidad. Pero hoy, con más razón, ya no para defender una clase, un sistema de ideas, sino para defender la vida colectiva, se necesita de nuevo la bandera levantada, quizás ya no roja, sino de todos los colores, una bandera de toda la humanidad, para defender su propia existencia en el planeta. Quizás la palabra socialismo hoy tiene una nueva significación. Los cerebros, que son la base verdadera del trabajo, hoy están más conectados que nunca. Hoy el saber humano es más colectivo que nunca. Ayudarnos siempre fue la magia que nos permitió sobrevivir durante 1 millón de años en este planeta. Los individuos solo son débiles y terminan en manos del fentanilo, la droga de la muerte, de la derrota humana. Las personas somos fuertes si nos ayudamos, y esta ayuda alcanza la escala planetaria. La ayuda mutua, la construcción colectiva del saber, la humanidad como nuevo sujeto político es la base de una nueva significación del socialismo. Somos lo más avanzado de la vida. La vida inteligente debe defenderse, la vida inteligente, y defender las otras vidas de una oligarquía global que la ataca. Una nueva riqueza debe construirse, ya no basada en el petróleo, sino en la intensidad, en el trabajo creador y libre que permite la altísima productividad alcanzada ahora, incluida la inteligencia artificial
allow us make progress even with AI, but that AI does need to be controlled at a global level with public power. Productivity allows us to have creative free time. It allows human brains to come together, and coming together, human brains can achieve more. That network of humanity's neurons is what will allow us to vanquish with our flag held high. That is the flag of life. Now I'm not really talking to Biden, Macron, Scholz, Xi Jinping or Putin. But from China I have the idea of a dialogue between civilizations. From Europe I've taken the idea of its social compact. From the United States I've taken its love of its original democracy, the democracy of its founding fathers. From South America I've taken its diversity, its jockey on a horse, it's Simon Bolivar. From Africa I've taken their drums, the drums that summon us to communicate with the spirits of nature. From Jesus I've taken the idea of universal love, light, giving life.
que están en todos los pueblos del mundo, debemos tomar la fuerza de la mayor batalla por la vida de la historia humana. Esa batalla indudablemente es una revolución mundial. Necesitamos construir el mayor ejército de todos los tiempos, compuesto de guerreros y guerreras de la vida. El ejército de la vida no tendrá las armas de la oligarquía global, no tendrá armas nucleares, no competirá por armas, ni tendrá los dineros a manos llenas de los bancos, ni el poder de destrozar los niños en los genocidios de la oligarquía, pero tendrá el mayor poder de todos, el poder de una humanidad unida que no se dejará quitar su existencia en el planeta. Solo hay un punto de vida infinitesimal en millones de años luz alrededor del universo y se llama Tierra. Y en ella hay una vida superior, que es la vida inteligente, la humanidad. No podemos dejar apagar esa perla del universo. Sin la vida, solo la oscuridad inerte dominaría, y es esa oscuridad inerte la que llena el corazón y el alma de la oligarquía global y sus ídolos de barro. Le corresponde a la humanidad dar la batalla. Es la hora de los pueblos. Si los gobiernos no pudieron, como aquí se demuestra, y decidieron jugar con bombas y guerras sin sentidos, y matar niños y niñas, juegos de poder, entonces es la hora de tomar la solución de los grandes problemas de la humanidad en las manos de la misma gente, de la gente sencilla de la humanidad. En lugar de dirigirnos a gobernantes insensibles, dirijámonos a nosotros, el común. Dirijámonos a los pueblos para concertar las acciones comunes, las demostraciones de otro poder democrático en medio de ese poder de la humanidad convertida en conciencia actuante. Aparecerán nuevos gobiernos, nuevos liderazgos. Si la vida vence su extinción, ya no será la oligarquía global la que gobierne el mundo. Será derrocada para construir una democracia global. Una nueva historia está por comenzar. Gracias, muy amable.
Thank you for your kind attention.
Agradezco en nombre de la Asamblea,
on behalf of the General Assembly, the President of the Republic of Colombia.
A continuación,
the Assembly will now hear an address by His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Emir of the State of Qatar. I request protocol to escort His Highness, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحضور الكرام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Excellencies, may the peace, mercy and blessings of God be upon you. At the outset, I would like to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang on assuming the presidency of the 79th session of the General Assembly, wishing him every success in his tasks. I express appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis for his efforts during his presidency of the previous session, and we commend the prominent role played by His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, in strengthening its role and achieving its lofty goals. Mr. President, the blatant aggression that befalls the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip today is the most barbaric, heinous, and extensive aggression violating human values, international conventions and norms. This is not a war within the international relations well-known and common concept of war, but rather it is a crime of genocide by means of the most sophisticated weapons against the people, the siege in a detention camp where there is no escape from the barrage of aerial bombing. Resolutions, condemnations, and reports have been exhausted. Nothing is left except the undeterred, ongoing, and premeditated stark crime with children, women, and the elderly as their victims. We oppose violence and the targeting of innocent civilians by any party. But after a year of this war, and with all that has taken place and that continues to take place, it is no longer tenable to talk about Israel's right to defend itself in this context without being complicit in justifying the crime. It is no longer plausible for any official to claim that they do not know. The facts are well known, and reports issued by international organizations about the bombing of schools and hospitals, weaponizing access to food and medicine, in addition to the published and publicly uttered intentions of Israeli leaders. Therefore, the failure to intervene to stop the aggression is a major scandal. Ladies and gentlemen, every year I stand on this podium and I begin by talking about the Palestinian cause, the absence of justice, the perils of believing that it can be neglected, and the illusions of making peace without a just solution to the Palestinian cause. I have done so every year at a time when the Palestinian cause has become absent from the speeches of major powers representatives in our world. There are those who are tempted by the possibility of marginalizing this issue to get rid of its burden, or seeing it vanish without resolving it. But the Palestinian cause is resistant to marginalization because it is an issue of indigenous people on their own land, a people who are subjected to a settler colonial occupation. This occupation has taken the form of an apartheid system in the 21st century. Can this be overlooked? The Palestinian cause will remain in place except in two cases, either the end of the occupation or the disappearance of the Palestinian people. It seems there are those in Israel who entertain wishful thinking to eliminate the Palestinian people. The ongoing Israeli aggression for nearly a year is nothing but a result of the absence of a sincere political will, a deliberate international failure to resolve the Palestinian issue with a just solution and insistence of the occupying Israeli authorities to impose a fait accompli on the Palestinians and the world with all types of force. The ongoing brutal war has fired the coup de grace at international legitimacy and inflicted serious damage on the credibility of the post World War II concepts on which the international community was founded. As if the dire consequences of this approach, which are visible before our very eyes, are not enough to prove that ignoring a just solution is conducive to disaster. We discover to our disbelief that some are still trying to find innovative measures to run Gaza after the war,
من دون سلطة
or without an authority.
من منطلقات أمنية فحسب.
والمقصود
بالطبع أمن الاحتلال لا أمن الرازح تحت الاحتلال. إنها نفس طريقة التفكير التي قادت من كارثة إلى أخرى. إنه النهج الذي يريد تفصيل المنطقة كلها على قياس إسرائيل ويبحث عن طرق التفافية لتجنب إنهاء الاحتلال وفرض حكم شعب على شعب آخر بالقوة. أيعقل أنه حتى بعد هذه الكارثة لم تستنتج الدول الكبرى ذات القدرة على التأثير في سير الأحداث ضرورة وقف الحرب والتوجه إلى الحل العادل على الفور بدلا من التفنن في الصياغات للتهرب منه. إن زوال الاحتلال وممارسة الشعب الفلسطيني حقه في تغيير المصير ليست منة أو مكرمة من أحد. ومن المؤسف أن يفشل مجلس الأمن في تنفيذ قراره بوقف إطلاق النار في قطاع غزة أو يمتنع عن منح دولة فلسطين العضوية الكاملة في الأمم المتحدة على الرغم من اعتماد الجمعية العامة في شهر مايو الماضي قرارا يدعم طلب فلسطين لهذه العضوية. ليس حصول دولة فلسطين على العضوية الكاملة في الأمم المتحدة تحقيقا لسيادتها أو تصفية للاحتلال، ولكنه على الأقل يرسل رسالة لحكومة اليمين المتطرفة الضالعة في تحدي الشرعية الدولية بأن القوة لا تلغي الحق. والحديث عن إضرار مثل هذه الخطوة بعملية السلام هو ضر للرماد في العيون، فلا يوجد شريك إسرائيلي للسلام في عهد الحكومة الحالية، ولا تجري عملية سلام بل عملية إبادة. وفي هذا الصدد يثمن عاليا موقف الدول التي اعترفت بدولة فلسطين على حدود عام 1967. إن استمرار المأساة الإنسانية للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق منذ أكثر من 7 عقود ونصف يعد وصمة عار في جبين المجتمع الدولي ومؤسساته، ولا معنى لأي حديث عن الأمن والسلام والاستقرار في منطقة الشرق الأوسط والعالم بأسره إذا لم ترافقه خطوات عينية تقود إلى الوقف الفوري لإطلاق النار وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لكافة الأراضي العربية. الحضور الكرام، لا يخفى عليكم أننا أمام كارثة إنسانية في غزة والأراضي الفلسطينية الأخرى التي تتعرض لهجمات منسقة بين جيش الاحتلال والمستوطنين في محاولة لتطبيق خطط لتوسيع الاستيطان وضم الضفة الغربية وتهويد القدس. يتحمل المجتمع الدولي تبعات ما يحدث للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق الذي يتعرض لحرب إبادة ترتب عليها سقوط أكثر من 41,000 شهيدا حتى الآن، عدد المفقودين تحت الأنقاض من بينهم 17,000 طفل و11,000 امرأة و100,000 مصاب، بينهم آلاف المصابين بإعاقة، وتشريد الملايين عدة مرات، وتدمير كامل البنية التحتية من مستشفيات ومدارس ومباني بما في ذلك المساجد والكنائس. خلال الإبادة الجماعية لأجزاء من الشعب الفلسطيني تجري عملية تدمير مجتمع بأسره. إنه المجتمع الفلسطيني الغزي الذي حافظ على رقيه وحقق درجة مثيرة للدهشة من التطور في ظل حصار خانق ممتد منذ أكثر من 17 عاما. السيد الرئيس، لقد اختارت دولة قطر الاطلاع بجهود الوساطة سعيا منها لوقف العدوان على غزة وإطلاق سراح الأسرى والمعتقلين، وإنها وساطة في ظل حرب شرسة وظروف معقدة لا يتورع خلالها طرف عن اغتيال القيادات السياسية التي يفاوضها. هكذا اغتيل إسماعيل هنية الذي يتناسى كثيرون أنه لم يكن القائد السياسي لحركة حماس فحسب، بل كان أيضا أول رئيس وزراء فلسطيني منتخب. الوساطة والعمل الإنساني هما خيارنا السياسي والاستراتيجي على المستوى الإقليمي والدولي، وواجبنا الإنساني قبل السياسي، ولا نمنن به أحدا. وقد أثمرت جهود الوساطة التي بذلناها بالشراكة مع جمهورية مصر العربية والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بعقد اتفاق هدنة إنسانية في شهر نوفمبر الماضي أدى إلى وقف مؤقت لإطلاق النار في قطاع غزة وإطلاق سراح 240 من الأسرى الفلسطينيين و109 من المحتجزين في غزة، ورفع مستوى تدفق شحنات الإغاثة، كما قدمنا الدعم الإنساني للسكان المدنيين في قطاع غزة، وأسهمنا في إجلاء الجرحى والمرضى، ودعمنا المبادرات الإنسانية لإيصال المساعدات عبر كل الطرق المتاحة، ورفعنا أيضا من مستوى دعمنا لوكالة أنروا، هذه الوكالة الدولية التي لا يمكن الاستغناء عن خدماتها، والتي تعرضت إلى افتراءات لأسباب سياسية متعلقة برغبة حكومة إسرائيل في تصفية قضية اللاجئين من دون حل قضية فلسطين. ولن تألو دولة قطر جهدا في تقديم مختلف أشكال الدعم الإنساني للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق حتى إنهاء هذه الأزمة. وعلى الرغم من التحديات الجسيمة ومحاولات العرقلة وما نتعرض له من افتراءات، نواصل جهدنا في التوصل لحل النزاعات بالطرق السلمية، فنحن ندرك أن أي نزاع لا يخلو من قوى معنية باستمراره ومشككة بأي وساطة مهما كانت النوايا، وسوف نواصل بذل الجهد مع شركائنا حتى التوصل إلى وقف إطلاق النار الدائم وإطلاق سراح الأسرى المعتقلين والتوجه إلى مسار الحل العادل وفقا لقرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية وحصول الشعب الفلسطيني على كافة حقوقه المشروعة، وفي مقدمتها دولتها المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية على حدود 1967. إن قيام دولة فلسطينية مستقلة ضمن حل عادل ودائم هو مصلحة الشعبين الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني، ولن نصل إلى هذا الهدف إلا بوجود شريك جاد وواع لأهمية نبذ الخلاف وإنهاء الاحتلال وكل أشكال العدوان حتى نصل معه سويا إلى السلام المنشود في الشرق الأوسط. السيد الرئيس، وفيما عدا ارتكاب جريمة كبرى بتفخيخ وسائل الاتصال اللاسلكية وتفجيرها بآلاف الناس في لحظة واحدة دون أخذ هويتهم أو مكان تواجدهم بالاعتبار، تشن إسرائيل حاليا حربا على لبنان، ولا أحد يعلم إلى أي حد يمكن أن تتدهور هذه الحرب، وهو ما سبق أن حذرنا منه مرارا وتكرارا. إذا لم تتوقف الحرب الوحشية على غزة يجب أن تتوقف هذه الحرب التدميرية المنهجية، وهذا خيار إسرائيل كما يعرف قادتها جيدا. إنهم يعرفون أنها لن تجلب الأمن والسلام لشمال إسرائيل أو للبنان، وإن مفتاح الأمن هو السلام العادل. أوقفوا العدوان على غزة، أوقفوا الحرب على لبنان. وفي اليمن الشقيق نتطلع إلى الحفاظ على هدنة عام 2022 والانطلاق منها نحو وقف شامل لإطلاق النار وتسوية الأزمة وضمان وحدة اليمن وتحقيق تطلعات شعبه الشقيق، وذلك من خلال التفاوض بين الأطراف اليمنية على أساس مخرجات الحوار الوطني والمبادرة الخليجية وقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة. وإزاء الأزمة في سوريا فإن موقف دولة قطر واضح منذ البداية وحريص على مصلحة الشعب السوري الشقيق، ونتطلع إلى أن
and that is that Qatar is keen on the interests of brotherly Syrian people, hoping that the parties and countries involved in the crisis will be convinced of the necessity for dialogue and understanding to end this crisis in accordance with the Geneva Declaration 1 and Security Council Resolution 2254 in a way that will achieve the aspirations of the Syrian people and preserve Syria's unity, sovereignty and independence. Regarding the Sudanese issue, we call on all the Sudanese parties to stop the fighting, and we reaffirm our support for all regional and international efforts to end this crisis in a way that will ensure the unity of state institutions and the sovereignty and stability of Sudan.
ندعم المسار السياسي وتنفيذ قرارات مجلس الأمن ونحث كافة الأطراف على العودة إلى الحوار وتجاوز الخلافات من أجل إتمام المصالحة الوطنية الشاملة والحفاظ على التقدم والمكاسب التي تحققت على المسارات الأمنية والسياسية والاقتصادية وتوحيد مؤسسات الدولة. لا يمكن للبلدان العربية أن تحقق الأمن والاستقرار من دون دول راسخة قادرة على التشريع وإنفاذ القانون ووضع سياسات وطنية وتنفيذها ولا يمكن أن ترسخ أي دولة وتستقر بوجود قوى مسلحة غير خاضعة لها. هذه أمور بديهية لا نقاش فيها. السيدات والسادة، لقد تسببت الحرب بين روسيا وأوكرانيا بمعاناة إنسانية كبيرة وآثار على أوروبا والعالم، ونحن نكرر دعوتنا لجميع الأطراف إلى تطبيق أحكام ميثاق الأمم المتحدة وقواعد القانون الدولي والعمل على إيجاد حل سلمي بوصفه الحل الوحيد الممكن. وفي هذا السياق وانطلاقا من إيماننا الراسخ بمبدأ التسوية السلمية للنزاعات، قدمنا خلال العام الماضي سهاما ملموسا حيث أدت الوساطة القطرية إلى تبادل للمحتجزين بين الولايات المتحدة وفنزويلا، كما تم لم شمل عشرات من الأطفال الأوكرانيين مع ذويهم بعد أن فرقتهم الحرب. وختاما نؤكد أن دولة قطر لن تدخر وسعا في العمل مع شركائها الدوليين ومنظمة الأمم المتحدة لتوطيد أركان السلم والأمن والتنمية المستدامة وحقوق الإنسان وسيادة القانون على جميع المستويات والتصدي للتحديات العالمية من أجل تحقيق مستقبل أفضل للجميع. أشكركم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Chair of the Assembly. We take this opportunity to thank the United Nations Assembly to give us a chance to speak. 30 years ago, South Africa was born as a new nation, equal, united, and free from apartheid. We adopted a new constitution as the birth certificate of our new nation. Our first democratic elections brought the tyranny of apartheid to an end, a system that this General Assembly had declared to be a crime against humanity. In adopting Resolution 2202A in 1966, as later endorsed by the Security Council in 1985, the United Nations was a beacon of hope in our quest for justice. The great wave of solidarity of the peoples of the world, led by the United Nations, turned the tide against apartheid. Today, democracy flourishes in South Africa. We have a progressive constitution, an entrenched human rights culture, and strong institutions. We have laws to advance equality and programs to protect society's most marginalized and vulnerable. We continue to transform our economy so that it is in a more competitive position to create jobs, to attract more investment, and that it should benefit all. South Africa is a party to global treaties on human rights, gender equality, children's rights, refugee protection, and environmental protection. A few days ago, South Africa also endorsed the pact that charts the course for a better future for global governance and towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As signatory to the Paris Agreement, we are contributing our fair share towards the global effort and have a just energy transition plan to guide our carbon journey and climate resilient development. Through the African Union, we are working to advance Agenda 2063. We're involved in mediation and conflict resolution across our continent and actively contribute to peacekeeping missions. Our political culture has evolved and it continues to mature. We have just held our 7th free and fair general elections since our democracy, paving the way for the formation of the government of national unity. 10 political parties have coalesced around a common agenda for economic growth, job creation, poverty eradication, and sustainable development. South Africa is in a new era, an era of great promise. In what some have called our second miracle, South Africans of all races have rallied behind the government of national unity. We are making headway in resolving some of our most pressing challenges. Our economy has started to improve, and investor confidence is on the rise. Our country's prospects look bright, and we look to the future with great hope. The South African story bears witness to the enduring role of the United Nations in global matters. In supporting our struggle, the United Nations affirmed the principles of the UN Charter, the fundamental human rights, the dignity and worth of every person, and the equal rights of nations, large and small. It affirmed the aspiration contained in the Universal Declaration of Rights that we should strive for a world free of barbarous acts that outrage the conscience of humankind. Genocide was declared to be a stain on the conscience of the world, and the world community took a stand against genocide. Apartheid was declared a crime against humanity and a stain on the conscience of the world. The United Nations took a stand against apartheid. These were seen as crimes against humanity then, and they continue to be crimes against humanity now. It has been 11 months since the Hamas attack that killed 1,200 people and where hostages were taken. As South Africa, we have condemned this attack. In response, Israel embarked on an act of collective punishment in its assault on the people of Gaza. The torment of the people of Gaza continues unabated. More than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed. Homes, hospitals, churches, mosques, and schools lie destroyed. Famine and disease stalk the streets of Gaza. This cannot but shock our collective humanity. The violence the Palestinian people are being subjected to is a grim continuation of more than half a century of apartheid that has been perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel. We South Africans know what apartheid looks like. We lived through apartheid.